Hello, dear listener. You are listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. I'm Chris, and as ever, I'm joined by my good friend Clem.
Hi, everybody. I'm back with a voice.
Apologies, dear listener. And my good friend Gerry.
Hello, how are yous?
With his beautiful voice, as always. Yes, fantastic. Yes, very well, thank you very much. I can't believe it's been another month, guys. I don't know where the time is going, but we've had plenty of Mantic content on the feed, which I have had nothing to do with, so that's always fantastic. Always enjoyable to listen to content I've not had to make. And I just want to say at the top of the show, actually, a big thank you to Tam, who has come on board and is helping us edit the podcast. So that's always been a bottleneck, because when Fred started editing the pod, I'm going to say a year and a half ago, the deal was he would edit one episode a month, and that was it. And for a long time now, he's been sometimes editing 3 episodes a week. So we're very, very happy to have the help. And I'm very, very glad we've done this before Fred quit. So Fred is now kind of, lead editor, let's say, something like that. And Tam has joined the editing team. And we're going to hope a couple more people start editing their own episodes as well to make a little bit of a difference. So, yes, thank you very much to Tam. So here we are, guys. So let's talk through on the menu. What are we doing today? So, welcome on the menu. That's what we're doing now, dear listener. So we're going to talk about a Warpath Firefighting Dead Zone. We're going to talk about our Panathor, Kings of War, obviously. Our Panalore for this month is Basilians, and I suspect for at least half of that we'll be debating which pronunciation is the correct one.
The Basileans.
We have a few listener questions and a topic of the month, which is going to be licensing, with a focus on Mantic and Mantic's licensing. And that's been sparked by a few listener questions we've had. So there we go, guys. How did I do?
Almost like a professional.
We're good to go.
Oh, in that case, it's all downhill from here then. Fantastic.
Pretty much.
So, so I keep forgetting to mention it as well, guys. We have a Patreon. The information's in the show notes. Give us money. And it's, as a few months ago I said, please make content for us and give us money. So do those two things, dear listener, because we are the Mantic Universe podcast, and we only have so much time. So, if you want to come in and make content, with us, it's all community led. By all means, come and get contact with us. So, guys, how would we? Sorry, Clem, go for it.
No, I just wanted to say it is all about the community and sharing our good times with Story Soldiers, and so everyone's welcome on board to do just that. I just wanted to mention.
Exactly right, buddy. Exactly right. There we go. Gerry, how are you, kind sir?
I'm the very best indeed, young man.
Oh, that's very nice to hear. I particularly like being called young man, which is nice.
Getting ready for Salute is upcoming in only a fortnight, so 2 weeks away from Salute.
Amazing. So and you talked about this last month, Gerry.
Yeah.
And you're there for work reasons. So what is it you'll be expected to do?
Not lash out indiscriminately at my colleagues. I think that's the main thing I'll be expected not to do.
It's political correctness gone mad.
I know, it's terrible. It's interesting because I have the Salute program now, so I know who's going to be where and when. Whenever we go across, previously there's a lot of time spent talking to companies, and some companies will release stuff around Salute. So the big companies tend to go to Adepticon, which was last week, and then make all the big announcements there. And then smaller companies, so the likes of the Perrys and people like that, will often release their things at Salute because they can't get across to Adepticon. So there might be a bit of talking to companies. The real thing I like to do, though, is go around the gaming tables, because Salute is it's a massive influx of clubs, in the majority of cases, putting on display games. So, you can walk around the corner and see the Isle of Wight War Games Club with their own Flash Gordon made entirely out of Lego. And on the next table, there might be a recreation of the Stalingrad tractor factory by another club, and just seeing the games that people put on that aren't connected to companies, because obviously companies will will try and show themselves off to the best of their ability. But I really just like seeing what gamers actually game when they're given the opportunity.
It's really cool, buddy. On a much, much smaller scale, just north of Frankfurt, there's something similar but way smaller. I think there was about 40 tables. I went for the first time last year. And the standout to me was, and there's all these games you've never heard of before, right? So there's a zombie game, and there's usually the person that makes them, and they're trying to sell a few models and sell a rule book, etc. There was a Western game, a zombie game, but what really stood out to me was there was a kind of Cthulhu game, and there was they scratch built this massive lighthouse. And half of it was kind of open. So one half had the wall, the wall and you could see it from the outside with windows. And the other half was kind of open. And they had they'd made these massive mechanical kind of steampunky style kind of mechanical workings of the clock. And there was, it's just incredible. And it was huge. It was, the size of a person. And then there was this kind of destroyed staircase leading up to it, and there was, there was basically a giant Cthulhu by the side of it that was sort of man-sized that someone had made. And as you say, Joe, it's just the creativity and the lavish detail that someone had obviously obsessed about this for a really, really long time. The whole thing is totally impractical. I mean, where do they keep this, But just all this love and attention into something that's just so wildly... I don't want to say pointless, that's not quite the right word, but there's no one needs this in their life. And to spend, presumably months and months and months working on this, it's just incredible.
I mean, it looks cool.
Well, this is it. It looks cool. It attracts people to, in the case of Salute, it attracts people to clubs. So all of a sudden you go, oh, what's that? Oh, well, they're only an hour away, 45 minutes, whatever it is, or, so you can get a big presentation like that. But yeah, so it's an unusual venue, club, convention, whatever you want to call it, because it kind of got out of hand. It started out just as the South London Warlords annual convention, and then it got bigger, and they had to move to bigger and bigger premises, and it's still all totally run by volunteers. And the reason it's only one day, and it's only 10 o'clock to 4 o'clock, it's a very short day as well, is because none of the people there are being paid to organise or run it. They could have expanded into a bigger venue again. They could have expanded into multiple days and all the rest, but it's one of these things where they're just going, well, this is already much bigger than we wanted or intended. It kind of distorts the club around it in some ways. But getting in and for a massive dose of gaming across the board, things, flats, which are big in Europe, don't really get seen in the UK so much. Somebody had a massive war game put on with just nothing but flats, which are essentially two-dimensional metal model soldiers. And things, seeing things like that is just always fantastic. So you never know what's going to be around the corner. I know there's going to be a few announcements, and I think Chronopia, which is being resurrected by a German company, who I can't remember the name of. They're planning on finally launching it at Salute this year. It's been a long time coming since the Kickstarter, so I'll be getting my hands on some of those again.
Oh, that sounds really interesting. I saw a load of, at that event I mentioned, north of Frankfurt, I saw a load of the old school blister packs of models. Oh, that looks interesting. I think it was, 20 years ago or something. I think it was genuinely a pretty popular game. Huh?
Yeah, I mean, they had a couple of different games. The sci-fi Warzone, the Mutant Chronicles Warzone was part of the same stable from Target Games in Scotland. Then they had Chronopia, which was spawned out of the Swedish version of RuneQuest. So then Target Games came up with these war games based on it. Warzone has just been released by another company in America. They've got the license and have started releasing it again. So it's kind of like that meme of Robin Williams. What year is it? Chronopia and Warzone back on sale.
I've just used my fingers to Google, Gerry, and it looks like it's a German company called Uhrwerk. So, clockwork, basically. Looks like they're doing it.
Yeah, that sounds about right. There's a subsequent part to that name, I think it starts with V, but I can't remember what it is because I haven't really paid enough attention recently.
You've still got a week. It's fine. Amazing. Fantastic. Okay, guys. So maybe we want to talk about Mantic news?
A little bit, yeah. Do we want to go through the easy stuff, like what's on the vaults, some of the new Halo stuff that I don't know about you guys, but I don't follow it too closely. Only know there's a bunch of new stuff coming out for Halo.
Yeah, let's talk about the vault first, buddy, because Clem's very kindly actually posted a picture into our show notes, dear listener, which is, turns out, Clem, this is massively helpful rather than us trying to remember from 2 weeks previously or whatever. Yeah, there's a little bit for everybody, I'd say. There's some Twilight Kin there. There's a lot of or a few models for sci-fi. There's a couple of the Matsudan, weapons arm options. There's a salamanders thing, I think. There's a crocodog. Yeah, there's some bases.
I'm not sure it's a salamander. I don't think it's a salamander. Do you think it is? Because it looks sci-fi to me.
Isn't it the Carmadon thing? Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it does look sci-fi.
I think the base is the same as the Kilodon, but I think that is specifically for the Matsudan Dead Zone.
That would make sense. That sounds really
cool.
good.
Got the Matsudan bikes as well there.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, good point, buddy.
The thing I'm not so sure about, though, is the Twilight Kin, because they kind of look like what you would put in a Vanguard warband. But do they have the rules for warband?
They're actually the models from the board game, from the Dungeon Saga Origins.
Yes, but I'm not so sure. I'm trying to remember now from the Vanguard Kickstarter if there were Twilight Kin rules and models then. I don't think so. And so I was kind of curious to see, is there a particular reason why they release these particular set of models as it is now?
I never actually checked out. I never paid much attention to that. Going back a couple of months from our conversation on the podcast, I think you and Gerry said that the Twilight Kin rules were there for Vanguard, or at least a new faction anyway, so I might be wrong. But perhaps that's the reason, perhaps not. Tell us, dear listener, because, we're not competent.
We're just faking it. We absolutely know, but being incompetent creates more clicks and engagement, right? That's the strategy.
Oh, yeah, now I remember. Yeah, good point, Clem. Good save. Oof, I don't think anyone noticed. Cool. But it's useful stuff to have, I think. I'm happy that stuff's in the vault. Yeah, I mean, at some point I'm going to do a Matsudan army for Firefight. So having those bits is cool. Yeah, sure, why not?
And I think the bottom left of the image, is it like for the Basilians guys? The banner and the musician stuff and so on?
Yeah.
I think so,
is
but
like
the helm is quite clear. I think it's the Paladin, isn't it? Paladin stuff?
Is it Paladin or Palasguard? Probably Paladin, you're probably right. Because the Palasguards are the ogres, basically, right?
That's exactly it.
Cool. I mean, if I was a betting man, I'd say they put those in because of the upcoming plastic cavalry, and people may want to stake a command at the start of that.
Which is a very cool idea. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Gerry. Which is a very cool idea, and that's one thing that we've been saying. We love it when Mantic do it, right? Fantastic. Cool. Anything else anyone wants to say about the vault this month? No,
not really. I think they're doing a good job. Good job about this. The bases, I like their intent. I'm not sure I would use them myself, but overall it looks like there's a bit of everything for everyone, and to me that's another pretty good month. So
I love it though, Clem. I mean, it's always good to have bases. So when you may come to do a project in 2 years' time, and you might look through the vault and go, "What bases can I 3D print?" Yeah, oh yeah, that will work. So you can never have enough different designs of bases. So I'm all for that, buddy. That's brilliant. Cool. In terms of Halo, I mean, Mantic, it was probably the worst kept secret in the world, but Mantic have announced the Banished are coming. And the Banished are kind of, gorilla monkey men that love to fight. And they got banished, would you believe, from the Covenant. I think I played one of the Halo games. They were in it, but I wasn't paying particular attention to the lore, so I'm not exactly an expert on all of this. But it seems like Halo is going gangbusters. I'm happy to see it. Gerry?
Yeah, the Banished, as far as the lore-wise goes, the limited edition figure in that box, Artrex, however it's pronounced, he essentially went, why are we fighting somebody else's war? And convinced the other, Juril Hana, I think is the brute's actual name, to rebel against the Covenant, where they've been doing all the fighting. There's been a whole host of comic books and the like as well around Halo, which gives more of the backstory than just the game. So he's led a rebellion, got kicked out, tried to take over a ring world, tried to craft their own ring world, at which point they were literally banished to another part of the galaxy and had to find technology to sneak back. He's been killed several times and then, like a bad curry, keeps reappearing. So they're an interesting faction. I'm curious to see the rules, because the elites are also coming out at the same time, at least sort of rebel versions of those to work with the Banished. Those Banished models are massive. They must be about 60 mil. Obviously, it's a 40 mil war game, but they look absolutely brutal and brutal deluxe. The regular Spartans, you're capped at 3 in a cube, unlike Dead Zone, because they're bigger models. The elites, you're capped at 3 in a cube as well. I don't know whether or not these are going to be a bigger size. You would imagine they would be. However, the 2 teams in the sort of the new starter box are 8 unique sculpts. So it's not like the original Recon edition where it was 4 sculpts in 2 colors. So you had red team, blue team. They've still got red and blue teams painted, but every single one of the brutes is a unique sculpt. So there's 9 of those, and I think they're probably going to be leaning in more to the list building and versatility of the sort of the Halo Wars expansion. It's not called Halo War, whatever it is. The one where you can go in and start statting up your Spartans and your elites and your brutes and go, rather than just having Team A and Team B with the same sort of kit on them. I think they've made the conscious decision right from the offset that you want everybody to look a bit different. If you look in the image, certain weapons and loadouts are still on both sides, but it's not the same model, so they've sort of pushed it a step further this time round.
So, wait, are they the good guys then? It's just you can mix them with the other good guys that are already here? Or how does it work? Because I really know nothing about the whole universe and everything.
I mean, good is subjective, I suppose. On the grounds they're not humans, they're probably not good, because they're trying to carve their own piece of the galaxy out. The fact they're not part of the Covenant anymore, who are attacking the humans and the Spartans, means they're sort of picking fights with everyone. So, yeah.
So they're more a different faction, and you cannot really align them in your regular team. It's like a different gameplay, most likely.
Yeah.
And so on. Cool.
Yeah, the only question will be what sort of way the rules come in with them. I imagine bigger size, maybe a bit stompy and smashy, like some of the big models for Dead Zone.
So, Gerry, how does it work with the whole? Because I got the feeling when Halo was released, that it was kind of played out like it was a training mission, introducing things like the Banished. Are they still kind of with that idea? It's a training mission, or is this supposed to be kind of a live fire exercise? If you know what I mean.
I didn't really bother paying much attention to the background of the Spartan and Recon Edition boxes, because they were just looking for a way to explain why Spartan would be fighting Spartan. It's the age-old problem of why is the same army or the same faction fighting each other. And because they were basing it not on the narrative games, they're basing it on the specifically on the multiplayer arena games, where you will get Spartan against Spartan or that sort of thing. It's kind of finding a justification for it more than anything else. So in this case, I mean, Dreadball's a good example of here's your team and you're playing against another team, but within the greater Warpath universe, should there really be vermin being coached to play Dreadball? Should it be muto plague monsters and cyborgs playing Dreadball? That's all kind of glossed over, or it's a bit Blood Bowl-esque in that regard. Yes, all of the factions are represented in Dreadball, but if you think about it too hard, it doesn't really make much sense.
No, it's kind of wacky. Yeah,
and they make up things going. They're not really plague. They're a fake version of plague that somebody's made because they sound good on the touchline. And I think it's the same here. There will be some sort of nonsense backstory as to why elites and brutes are on the same table against Spartans or whatever it happens to be. But I wouldn't. It's the Austin Powers. Don't think too much about it, and that goes the same for you at home. They just get them on the board and slap each other.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this was where the whole Horus Heresy came from in 40k or 30k or whatever, was that they only had enough money to make a certain amount of models. So they were like, okay, how can we make two factions out of this? Okay, paint one side blue, one side red, and then civil war. Okay, done. That's that's quite possibly where that came from. Cool. I mean, it's quite an interesting thing where, I've got the Halo starter box. I don't have enough time to play Dead Zone, and if I'm honest, I'd much rather play a game of Dead Zone than Halo. Not that I'm not interested, but it's just in that I only have so much time. So many universes, so little time. So I'm sort of semi-deliberately keeping a bit of a distance from Halo because, if I see this Banished box and go, oh, that looks amazing, I've got to buy it. And it's okay, cool, I've bought it, and then I don't have the time to do it. So, it's tricky. So I'm kind of deliberately keeping away from it. I'm really glad it's been such a massive success for Mantic. But, we've obviously, dear listener, we've got the Halo shows going on where people who are super passionate about this stuff are talking about it. So, yes, I would very much refer the dear listener to those episodes. But I think the three of us guys, I just don't, I don't think it's going to be massive in our lives going forward. I might be wrong.
Yeah, from my perspective, it's just obviously I'm curious to hear about what they're doing with it because it might be an area where you can experiment and create new things. And I'll be curious also to see if at some point they bring in new mechanics into Dead Zone, into the Dead Zone game engine, so to speak. And in that regard, for me, that could be interesting. But otherwise, yeah, I'm not so invested into this universe in particular. And so I just follow it from a bit of a distance.
Gerry, what about you, buddy?
Yeah, I'm kind of the same. I've only really played Halo, the very first one, many moons ago on my Xbox, which means I'm not massively invested in the IP. It was fun, but I'm not particularly au fait with the.
It's no Wheel of Time.
Yeah, it's no Wheel of Time.
Or Discworld. Or
oh my god, if only. The fact that they have made it 40 mil also helps me as well, because I'm not looking at it going, oh, but I could use those for GCPS Rangers. I can't. They're massive. That has kept me safe.
That's
they are completely scale different. So yeah, I mean, have the core box, give it a quick paint job. I'll quite happily play it on occasion if somebody at the club wants to play it, because it's a simplified version of the Dead Zone mechanics ish. There's certain things you can't do in Halo that you can do in Dead Zone. So it has the attraction for people to be able to go, oh, Halo, I know that, and then go, yeah, you can play it very quickly, but it's not something I'm massively keen on throwing all my money at.
Yes, it's interesting. I saw that just this week there's going to be a Starcraft miniatures game, and actually I wasn't sure I would be, but turns out I'm very excited at the idea of a Starcraft, which was a complete rip-off of Games Workshop. I think actually it was going to be a GW themed game, and I'm hearing this fifth hand, so maybe this is not completely correct, But I think there was a deal in place between Blizzard and Games Workshop, and Games Workshop got cold feet and decided they didn't want their name on it. And so that's when they had to rename the factions and that kind of thing. Because if you've played StarCraft, you'll know they really, really, really do look like Space Marines. And the Zerg really, really do look like Tyranids, and the Protoss really, really do look like the Eldar/Craftworld. So, I don't think that's a coincidence. But yes, I'd be very interested to see what happens with this tabletop game. And yeah, I could very much. I think it's coming to crowdfunding or Kickstarter. I think it's the company in Poland, Archon or something. Something like, I'm getting this wrong. But I'll be really...
Archon Studios, yeah.
Archon Studios, thanks, buddy. So I'll be really interested to see what happens with the Kickstarter. And if it's, pretty reasonably priced, I could see me ordering a starter set or whatever the base entry level is to the Kickstarter.
I'm kind of curious about how you translate an RTS game into a tabletop game, right? But do you do a balanced 2 armies per side and just go for it like this? And it's just the units that you can come from the game in a way? Or if they will have some additional mechanics to be closer to the experience, that part is a bit...
So the factions have a base, for example, or is it just a straight-out battle?
Yeah.
Because
Exactly,
it's one of those things where I think, oh, that sounds really cool. And then I think, hang on a second, what's the base actually going to add to the game other than time, taking a lot longer to resolve things? But if they can think of a smart way to do it, it'd be interesting.
Yeah, it's just a question of will they do just yet another, 40k equivalent, except it's a different type of unit.
Right, exactly.
Some differences in the mechanics. I mean, that could be very funny if they did, what 40k should do with alternate activations and so on and so forth, and kind of bring a lot of players through the license and just a better rule set. So yeah, we'll see. I've never really played StarCraft, so I saw the announcement and I thought, cool. And that was about it. I don't know. Gerry, did you ever play StarCraft?
No, I never played StarCraft. I did play a lot of Warcraft. It's obviously the fantasy version. And they were good fun. I think you're right, though. It comes down to, are they just going to be putting another rank and file game onto the tabletop? And the only difference will be, you might recognize some of the heroes or the factions, So the Zerging away. Well, I've always really wanted my Nids to look like Zerg. Now I can actually just have Zerg models smashing. Or will they try and tie it to the gameplay mechanics of the PC game, which is interesting in itself, because if you try and stick too closely to what the PC game does, then all you're really doing is going, instead of playing the miniatures game, I just play the PC game again. It doesn't require me to paint things up, and I can, shut the computer down at the end of the night and don't have to clear dozens of men off the table.
Isn't it kind of like the MechWarrior thing of, do you really want to do the simulation with paper and dice, or just start your computer or your gaming console and have the computer, compute all the simulation for you? I think it's a similar question. Yeah.
So a lot will come down to the mechanics behind it. I tend to be more into fantasy anyway than science fiction. So, maybe if it's decent enough in StarCraft and they do a Warcraft version, potentially I would look at that. But they would have to really do something not just different, but significantly different and interesting and playable for me to go, well, I'd rather play that than Kings, because I think King's War just sits as, for me, it's the perfect rule set for rank and file. But I have seen war game style mechanics, like not base building, but there's a Franco-Prussian war game called Eagles of Empire. And if you hold objectives, you get requisition points / victory points. So if you think about your base building in the terms of the objective markers on the table, you go and hold a river ford, and every turn you get a VP or 2 VPs for holding it. Then at the start of each turn, you can either cash those in to requisition more troops, but they're also used as victory points for the end of the game. So you go, well, if I spend the victory points, I don't have the victory points, but if I spend them, I'll have more troops, and therefore maybe I can push harder or reinforce an area where my opponent has beaten me and maybe removed some of my units from the table. And that's a very simple system that you could do, not the base building, but the troop requisition that you have with the likes of the RTS sort of games. So maybe they'll do something like that.
That actually sounds really cool, Gerry. I mean, they would have, I think it was crystals. It was like blue crystals with the resource. I forget what they're called. And then I think it was called something like Vesper gas. So yeah, that would be actually really, really interesting. If you held these points, then you got a certain amount of crystal points, and then you could bring reinforcements on from your base or something. That would actually be really, really cool. You'd want to keep it very simple and light. You wouldn't want to get bogged down, I think. I also wonder, actually, thinking about it, how many Space Marine players are going to want an awesome Starcraft-themed army, to proxy model and play 40k or one-page rules or something. I suspect a lot of people would like those models. But we'll have to wait and see. But I think it's a really cool idea. And as you said, Gerry, they could also do Warcraft. And again, I'd be pretty interested. But again, I don't have time enough for the games I already have. So it is tricky. But I genuinely think I would probably, on some level, get some StarCraft stuff, even if it was just to paint up the models and have them sitting on my shelf looking at me, making me feel guilty.
Hey there, I'm Brian.
And I'm Rick.
From Dead Zone, the podcast.
And you're listening to Mantic Universe Podcast.
For everything Mantic under the sun.
Yes, I'm very happy that my friend Chris, who has been on the pod and came with us to Clash of Kings, he and I used to play with a couple of friends multiplayer back when dial-up internet was a thing. And they used to, on the original StarCraft, they used to have these kind of Starship Troopers levels that were designed by players and community, because you could upload your own levels. And so you'd have these maps where there was a massive human base in the middle, and you'd have to survive for 30 minutes or something, and an enormous amount of Zerg would attack your base, just like in Starship Troopers, right, where they're defending, is it Whiskey something outpost, and it's really cool. And waves of enemies come, and they'd get tougher and tougher and tougher, and you just have to hold out until the timer ticks down. And it's quite a passive experience, but it was incredibly exciting as a, 15, 16-year-old. It's really fun. So, have happy memories of that. Anyway, guys, I think that's probably enough conversation about StarCraft, I guess, begrudgingly.
I mean, it's kind of a foreshadowing for the licensing discussion later, right?
Right, absolutely. We did it on purpose. No one can prove otherwise.
Exactly. I mean, there is another big news for Mantic for this month with Champions, right? Because now we've seen basically everything. It's on pre-order, and it's coming out in 2 weeks, I think, mid-April. Is that right?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah,
what do you think,
launching
Gerry?
at Salute. Launching at Salute in mid-April, yeah. So that'll be interesting. We'll see how things pan out for it. Because you've got the announcement now, there's going to be 4 faction boxes on the initial release, and then 1 a month until the end of the year, more or less. So interested to see what goes into them, and if there's any bleed over from Champions back into Kings, because all of the champions that seem to be leading the factions are all sort of 40 mil square based things. Whether or not they'll get rules into Kings of War proper, or whether they'll keep them separate and distinct, will be fascinating. I mean, if they've got the models, I'd be surprised if they don't get shoehorned in somewhere, but you never know.
Yeah, I mean, I always assumed they would. Sorry, Clem.
No, go ahead.
No, that's pretty much it. I think they will. Clem?
Yeah, I think some of them can already be used for some profiles in Kings of War, but yeah, the different base size is an interesting decision. I think of all of the reactions that I've seen, people seem to really like the Scots, and to be fair, I also think they're very good models, like the new champions. So it would be a bit of a waste to not use them also in Kings of War, now that they have the skulls available, right? So
yeah, Mantic have a history of using things as efficiently as possible, right? I think part of that is born out of not having any choice, but I don't think there's anything wrong with that, right? But yeah, I mean, all the feedback I've seen has been very positive. Mark is obviously very excited. He loves low points games. I have a couple of, I don't want to say concerns, but it's just, firstly, I think as someone who has so many Kings of War armies, I'm not the target audience. But I feel like Mantic have been slightly disingenuous with this, because on one hand they're saying existing players aren't the target audience, but they have pushed it very heavily among those communities, including us. So it is and it isn't. I think if Ambush didn't... sorry, Clem, go for it.
No, I mean, I think the target audience is not us, it's our friends, right? So they push it to you so that you buy it as a gift to a friend or, a kid or something like this.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily for you to play or to replace all the things that you play. It's definitely more aimed at complete beginners. But I still think they rely heavily on existing players to keep recruiting these new players.
To basically be in the Pathfinder role. I mean, I think if Ambush didn't exist, I would think this is a brilliant, brilliant product. With Ambush existing and actually being relatively new, to me personally, I think it's a little bit confusing. I mean, for example, if you're a store now and there's Ambush boxes and there's Kings of War champions, if I were to look at those two boxes, I would not understand the difference. And I do think it's a little bit of a mistake to simplify the Kings of War rules, because the Kings of War rules are already pretty simple. So, did you need to get rid of heights? Again, because I'm thinking about it as a sort of, someone who's working hard to build a community. If two members of the community say, "Oh, Chris, have you seen Warhammer Champions? This looks great. Let's play that." It's like, okay, but this is a separate thing. So, although we're a relatively new community, would it possibly be splitting our player base? And do people really understand that? So it's kind of, I don't want to sound negative, because I think the boxes all look gorgeous. I think the hero models look lovely. The Northern Alliance, for example, dwarf guy looks fantastic. But it's a bit of a strange proposition to me, given Mantic's previous decisions. You can't just take this in isolation. You have to look how everything adds up all together. I mean, other people seem very excited about it, so it's a very fair. Maybe I'm in isolation with my sort of concerns about it. I mean, for example, I already have all the stuff for several of the faction boxes. So let's say, for example, Northern Alliance, all I would need is the dwarf model, the hero model, and I need the rules and the cards. It would be nice if Mantic would just sell me the bits I need, so I don't have to rebuy things I already have ready. That would be nice, and I would almost certainly do that. I'm probably going to pick up a starter box with the two armies at some point, because all that stuff is actually cool for me, and you're building up two gorgeous armies. And the other, while I'm having a little moan, the only other thing I would say as well is Mantic is selling this as a low model count game. But it's kind of 20 to 30 models. Now, if I was someone that never painted a model, or I was a skirmish game player, if I played Kill Team or whatever, to me, 20 to 30 models is no longer a low model count game. I would think something like up to 10 models. Okay, up to 5 models would be better, but up to 30 models, it's not really a low model count game. Clem, I think you're onto something there when you say these people are going to be relying on existing Kings of War players to help them through it. And maybe that's the case.
I'm with you on all of this. I think for me, these boxes are really nice because they are all in one. Right? It really looks like you can get that one, and there's no question about it, or compared to an ambush box, right?
And you don't need to worry about how do I build this, or you just do follow the instructions. All that stuff is great. Yeah. If ambush didn't exist, I would be so on board for this idea. I would think it was brilliant. Gerry, what do you think, buddy?
Well, I think there's a couple of things. First is how many new Kings of War players have been introduced because of Ambush. Obviously, we don't see those sort of numbers. But is it the case that while Ambush sounds great, the levels of complexity within it, list building, and then still having to go off and buy additional models because the Ambush box is not complete, it's just a nice start. You need to have a certain skill set already on hand regarding what works in a list for Ambush, because you do have all the options in there. And while they can say, you can build these, but you can also build X, Y, and Z, there's still a sort of a speed bump in the road, if you will. I think Ambush is probably a lot more popular within existing Kings of War players than actually bringing new people into Kings, because it gives you a chance to play lower model count games. And if you look at points-wise what you get in an Ambush box, sometimes they are massively different. You can get nearly 500 points in one of the boxes, and I think it drops down to about 270 in one of the others. So they're nowhere near equal either. So here's an Ambush box, and your mate gets an Ambush box, then you go, I will now proceed to kick you around the table every time we play until you buy double what you have, because the boxes are not points adjusted. There's no heroes or anything else in them. So I can see from a introduction to rank and file that Champions is spot on for that. All the boxes are balanced. You don't need to buy anything else. In fact, you can't buy anything else because they are one and done. So for new players, picking something like this up, it's ideal in that respect. Model count wise, 20 to 30, it's not terrible. Because even I think most kill team squads are sort of a dozen models, so you're potentially maybe doubling the amount of models that somebody will have painted prior to that. But I think from the point of view of either bringing brand new players in, or maybe you've got dead zone players in your area who have never done fantasy, it may be a good way of doing that without having to panic them about just volume of stuff, because you know that it doesn't matter if they pick up the Void Talon or Talson's company, they're all equal. So you can get away with 4 units on the table and play some quick games, play some leagues, something like that maybe.
I think you really good point there, Gerry, but I would say yes, and potentially for the reasons you've explained there, maybe this is an even better thing than Ambush, but Ambush already exists, so I feel like you've got the Venn diagram. These two things are very close to each other. It was like when another Rob Berman game, it was like when Overdrive came out, and there was, people were asking, oh, great, is this a new version of Dreadball? It's like, no, it's in that area, but this is a different thing. And it's the two things are they distinct enough? Is there space enough for these two things to exist? And I'm not sure. But I think you're absolutely right. In terms of getting new people in, perhaps Ambush wasn't the success we wanted it to be, because you may well be right that it was existing people, just a good way for people to buy new armies or bulk out their armies, but existing players. So perhaps that's the thing. Clem, what do you think?
I think the Ambush boxes and the two-player starter set even more, they were great value if you want those models, but kind of not much help if you don't know where to start and want to get started with it. So I think Ambush in itself is great, and it works really well for new players into Kings of War, because you can start playing much earlier on, and it's kind of a legit way. I know Mark has been playing 500-point games forever, but some of the things maybe don't work as well, or on the list building, the fact that you have something different for Ambush really helps. And so what I have seen in my local group is a lot of people would have never tried Kings of War if Ambush hadn't existed, and they would just never play Kings of War without Ambush. And so in that regard, Ambush is already a success, I believe. What the champion boxes bring is the, all-in-one balanced experience. And then I guess there's something that you just can't get around, that if you want to balance the ogres box versus the goblins box, you have to change the rules a little bit, and you can't just write standard ambush army set for the number of models that you fit in those champion boxes, because then they just don't match up in terms of balancing.
But
So
Clem,
maybe that's the reason why they changed the rules as well.
bear in mind we do have multi-basing. I mean, I think it would have been much, much better had Mantic thought this through with ambush as to start with. So this was all thought through. You're limited by the way that the sprues are, I guess. So that's the thing. But because of multi-basing, I mean, it could be, you don't necessarily have to do, I mean, okay, maybe you'll have to find yourself a few more bases or something. But I just wonder, yes, it wouldn't have been as good a product, but perhaps you could have just taken the existing ambush boxes and planned around that rather than kind of bringing in this new thing. So maybe, ambush boxes just needed a bit more help. And I know that's maybe not as exciting, but, maybe you could have kind of implemented a lot of these ideas with the ambush, around the ambush boxes. So perhaps if there was, like another layer of information on the Mantic website, you give info away for free, because maybe you could find another level of customers or a new type of customers off the back of that. Maybe it's not as exciting. These new champions boxes look really, really great, but I don't know. Having those two products being so similar to me, I find that I feel like it's filling a gap that doesn't really exist.
I think one aspect to this is, I'll take the example of my local gaming store. They basically stopped stocking Mantic products. They still have Terrain Crate and they still have Halo in the board game section, but they have never stocked the ambush boxes, for example. And so I wonder if, in a way, for Mantic, it's also another opportunity to go back to a gaming store with a very limited number of items. Like, you need the starter set and perhaps a couple of the faction boxes. It doesn't take much space. It doesn't take much investment for the gaming store to have this on display and on offer. And from completely outside of, Mantic universe or even tabletop universe, it feels like the champions boxes are orders of magnitude more readable and understandable compared to their other products. So what I'm saying here is, there is no way that the ambush boxes would end up in a toy store, for example, or on a shop that isn't only specialized in tabletop stuff. Versus the champion boxes, it would not be shocking to see them in a toy store, for example, because they look neat, they look like all in one, and it looks like it's something you buy this thing to someone who wants to get started, and that's it. So in that regard, I think it goes in the right direction. And then I agree with you, how you bridge the gap then with Kings of War and with Ambush is kind of a question mark. I'm waiting to see, what type of lists you can build with the models inside each of those companies, and then play them with the regular Ambush rules. And that would be an interesting thing to see. Last thing I wanted to say is, go ahead. Yeah, go.
No, don't go for it, Clem. You made a great point with it getting into toy stores, so that was an excellent point.
The next thing I'm really wondering about is who in my local gaming group will buy some champions, if anyone. From what I've read of the discussion channels and so on, it's mostly people with kids, because they're like, oh great, I'm gonna play this with my kid. I'll just get them one of the companies, the one that they like, and then we just have a quick and easy thing that can just play with them, and that's it. I myself, I'm pretty much on the same boat as you, Chris. I have mostly all of the things that I would need except the rules and the champions, and so I'm like, it's kind of painful to just get them. I still will most likely get the starter sets. I haven't pre-ordered it yet. So I'm waiting to see if it makes its way into one of my local shops, because then I would rather buy it there. Yeah, from a very selfish perspective of will that bring new players for me to play with? Maybe, and in that regard, it's a good thing. But I'm still waiting to see if that's really the case.
From what Mantic have said, they've kind of said, they've alluded to, that they'll be fine if customers come in, new customers come in and just start playing champions. And instead of going to, Kings of War, they'd be happy with them just picking up a different champions box and playing a different faction, which makes a lot of sense. I think that one positive aspect we haven't talked about is I think obviously Mantic have had a huge amount of attention that they wouldn't normally get, and they've been on, large video game websites like Polygon with very positive articles about them. So loads of eyeballs are going to be on Mantic that aren't normally on them. So if people see them because of Halo, and then suddenly there's this, possibly attainable, just buy this box for $50 and you're playing this, and then it's one and done and you're playing this game. So the timing of that is, I think, really, really fantastic. So, yeah, I mean, everything I've said is true to me, but I hope that this is very successful for Mantic. It's just kind of, I just feel like I'm not quite the target audience as much as I'd like to paint up some of these gorgeous models. And that's okay, and that's totally okay. And it's not to say Mantic are making a mistake doing it. It's just not. It's not for me. And obviously, I want them to be as successful as possible. Gerry, what do you think, buddy?
Yeah, I think it's more or less what you guys have already said. Will I pick some of them up? Probably. Will it become a default game for me? I doubt it, because whenever I get the chance to play, it's set up in advance, so I don't have a local game store that I can walk into and then just look for a pickup game. So anytime I'm going to play, I'm already arranging a big game, so it's not really a niche I need filled. I will throw one more thing out though, just on the positioning of it alongside Ambush. Where are the Ambush rules? There's the little A5 get you by quick start in the box, but the full rules, you have to get the full Kings of War rulebook, don't you? Or
the app. Yes.
Or go into the app, which isn't as easy as just going, here's the full rules in the box set.
A QR code to the free rules or something like that, or QR code to the app in the box would be great. But you are a good point, Joe. That is a very good point.
Because if you don't know Ambush exists, it's just another Kings of War box sitting on a shelf. So it's trickier to explain what it is. It's kind of like a smaller version of the big game, and you'll find the rules in various places attached to the big game as a supplemental rule, but it's not really an individual standalone game. And what size is it? Whatever size you want. What?
Yeah.
You can go up to 1,000 points. Is that not a game of Kings of War then? Yeah, but it's still champions because you've got less units you can pick from. Going, I've given up listening. Oh, okay.
So, yeah, with hindsight, I kind of wish they'd magically implemented some of the Kings of War champions ideas into the Ambush release, but you can't retroactively do that. Another thing that concerns me is when, it's so important Mantic have good relationship with stores, right? And if you call up a store to say, hey, do you want some of this new Kings of War champions? Okay, what is it? If the store had already bought some Ambush boxes or some, like the Kings of War army boxes that hadn't sold, trying to explain to them how this is different or how this is, going to help them. I'm not sure. I'm not sure quite what the sales pitch is there. But anyway, I feel like I'm being very negative, but I suppose it is what it is.
Yeah, I think in the end, it's like you said, right? We're not exactly the target audience directly. I think for me, the question is if someone comes to me and says, "How that looks interesting. How do I start?" Do I tell them, hey, just buy a champions box or get an ambush army started? Do you know what I mean? And so that's a question I haven't really answered yet. And I guess that will be kind of a difference. I agree it's a perfect product for all the Halo players that might be looking for something different and would consider Mantic games now. And so that's an easy entry for them. Or for complete beginners, but then for older players or players that already have armies like us, What's our interaction champion will be, that's still an open question, I think. And I guess we'll see once it's actually out there in the field and people start interacting with it. But yeah, it's an interesting release for sure.
Nice. Should we move on to our Warpath Firefighting Dead Zone, guys?
Why not? I think it will be a very quick one this month, right? Because I have not touched anything Warpath.
Have you painted your terrain, Clem?
I have not done terrain either. No.
Gerry?
No. The closest I've come is I'm currently working on French Napoleonic zombies for a Walking Dead Waterloo game that I'm going to be filming this coming week.
This sounds amazing. Is this the Mantic Walking Dead rules, or is this a different...
Oh, yeah. No. Just grab the anthology where you can stat up your own figures, and then using the British silver bayonet figures, along with the Salute Lieutenant Colonel model that they give away this year. It comes from Waterloo, where the French broke through the gate at Huguemont, and he led a sort of counter, ran past a load of Frenchies inside the courtyard to close the door, and then dealt with the people inside afterwards. I'm going, that sounds like it could be fun, but I don't want to play another Silver Bayonet / Stargrave, Frostgravy type game. And then I thought, you know what? What if I use the French Napoleonic zombies that Wargames Atlantic have just released, and then do The Walking Dead instead? So you've got a small band of British inside who are going to have to contest with constant influx of zombies through the door. And then can they get the door closed in time, or will they all be overwhelmed and eaten? The fact that Napoleon got the nickname Old Boney is just too good as far as having him being some sort of Lich Lord resurrecting the French army.
Gerry, this sounds so incredibly cool. That's so fun. Fantastic. Amazing. And it's quite a simple rule set as well. So, I mean, it's simple but very thematic. So it'll be I imagine it'll be very straightforward if people have never played it before to just pick it up, you know?
Oh, 100%.
Amazing.
And the fact it's 20-inch square means, you can stick it down at the end of the table and just have people go, what is that? Let me tell you about the bravest man in the British Army and how he had to deal with zombies.
That's amazing. Cool. And while we're off topic, dear listener, yes, I played a game of Antares today, and it was amazing. My friend Caleb came over. The kids were with their grandma. It was just magic stuff. Yes. And we modified the scenario a little bit. So we were trying to mine unobtainium, as we called it, as there were kind of two kind of derricks in the map, in the middle of the map. And one of them, you roll a dice, and one of them randomly would generate a barrel of unobtainium, as we were calling it, from the fantastic movie Avatar. But then you could, as an action, you could also manually try and pump the thing to get another barrel. And then if you give a barrel to an infantry model, if they can get the barrel off your table edge, you score 2 victory points at the end of the game. If they're holding it during the game, then you just score 1 victory point. But it was extremely funny, and we both played as the Algorin faction, which are kind of basically the Jem'Hadar for anyone that knows Star Trek, except they're still humans and they're cool, despite what anyone else says. And yes, we had 50 points, which is quite a small game. It's kind of 750 points of ambush. You have 5 units each. So we both had a different kind of elite unit. He had a Reaver unit, which are basically stabby, chargy guys, and I had a hazard suits unit, which is guys in suits designed to go into, places that aren't safe to breathe. So they've got these massive chunky suits, and they've got plasma cannons, and they're very, very cool. And I got absolutely destroyed, but very luckily I almost got a draw at the end due to reasons, but it wasn't to be. But if I were to get a draw, I think I would have thrown the result out, because Caleb was winning the entire game, and then something ridiculous happened, where one of his units unexpectedly went down, had all the barrels. We were like, if a unit is down, do they still score the victory points? And we decided, yes, they very much do. So I nearly squeaked a draw, but it was, yes, an incredibly fun and funny game. And my leader also charged his leader, but he managed to slink away, the coward. But it was, yes, very, very fun and not Mantic sci-fi.
This is Andy from Mantic Games, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast. So much universe, so little time.
But yeah, I keep planning to play a game of Firefight, but yes, other things keep coming up. I mean, I very much enjoy it. I am in the process of printing off a massive 3D printing project for terrain, which will also work for Firefight, which is Dark Fantastic Mills, which is one of my favourite terrain companies. They recently did like a kind of a sci-fi trench / fortress thing. So there's lots of trenches, trench stuff, but also lots of kind of pillboxes and things like that. And it's super cool. So at some point, I'm going to finish off that printing project, and when that's done, I think it'll be rude not to have a game of Firefight and have all the GCPS lining up in the trenches and potentially Clem getting attacked by your plague. That would be super, super cool.
Sounds like a plan, yes.
Yeah. But I think, guys, unfortunately, I think we're going to have to move on to our Panathor Kings of War.
Let's do it. There will be other months with more sci-fi, but it happens.
Absolutely, buddy. It happens. Cool. Gerry, have you done any or played any Kings of War? And I'll try to stop asking you 4 questions at once. Let's stick with one question.
I have been working away on my ogres with a view to actually getting them finished, because they've been kicking around since the very first Kickstarter when I got them as a mega army. So they've been in various states of disrepair for a while now, but the first thing to do was to start working out how I'm going to build the army, because I have 4 horde bases already made, 2 of which are sculpted so that they can be stuck together to make a legion, because I sometimes feel like I don't field enough legions of ogres. I find people get very upset when you do it as well, which is good fun. But I only have those 4 out of a potential 11 or 12 unit list. So before I do any more painting, I've been starting to cut and shape and work out the basing. I'll put some pictures into the Discord of the current ones, so people can see those. But that's the sort of the hobby modelling side. So working on the ogres, and this coming week I will be introducing a friend to Kings of War via the medium of Universal Battle. So lovely gentleman lurking in Germany is about to have Kings of War thrust upon him, which will probably be, he does a Twitch stream every Tuesday, the Hobby Hangout, where we normally just talk about people's sort of hobby modelling projects and bits and pieces. But it's the 250th episode, because he started it during lockdown to give himself something to do so he didn't go screaming off the deep end. I was like, what will we do for something a bit different for the 250th episode? He refused to wear a bikini in a hot tub, so we decided I will teach him Kings of War live, where people can watch him fail and watch my dice also fail.
That's pretty cool. Although missing out on the bikini and the hot tub, I mean, that's a bit.
That's only for the Patreon supporters.
I thought it was for the OnlyFans.
Oh, right, different audience.
Either would work. If people send us money, we'll put the clothes back on.
Oh, now you're talking, Gerry. You've cracked it. You've cracked it wide open. Absolutely. Perfect. Fantastic. No, it's great. I'm glad to see, being bought out hasn't changed on the tabletop whatsoever. You guys have carried on.
Won't change me.
Fantastic.
Bought out, not sold out.
Clem, what about you, buddy?
Well, I have been painting more of my Force of the Abyss. I'm almost done with them, actually. I only have a couple of units left. Well, a bit more than that, if I'm honest. The latest thing that I've been doing is modifying lower abyssals to give them wings to make gargoyles of a different style. for two reasons. One is my multi-basing scheme, so it's the ice stuff, so it's painted icy stuff and transparent resin poured on top. And so the Mantic gargoyle model don't really fit well basing-wise on top of that. And the other reason is my transport box is kind of packed on the tall. I have two trays, one for infantry size models, one for tall models. And because my list has a bunch of berserkers, the tall models tray is basically full, and I can't put my gargoyles in there. And so I'm making gargoyles that are height 2 gargoyles, so more close to the rules, with the lower abyssals with some wings. It's just it turned out much better than I was expecting initially. I just printed some of the actual gargoyles, if I remember correctly, from is it the Vault? Yeah, they're on the Vault now, or from the Vanguard crowdfunding, I don't remember, and just broke the wings off and glued them on the back of lower abyssals. So now I have lower abyssals with wings. So I need to finish the painting on that. And I have also the horsemen, because I have already 2 regiments of horsemen from my, back in the day, previous iteration of the Forces of the Abyss. And I was thinking, do I rebase these ones and, retouch the painting and so on? Or I also had one box not opened yet, like not assembled yet, of horsemen. And so I've decided to actually build this box and make them brand new, and not touch my older ones, because I thought, removing them from the base and retouching the paint job would have been a bit of a hassle, and so I'd rather start anew with kind of a different direction for this army. So I'm almost done with the 2,300 points. And I have not played with it again in quite a while, but next weekend we're doing a gaming day at Motion Lab, like we've done in the past. And so I will take the Forces of the Abyss. I'll take the Ambush version, and I'll take the 2,000 and 2,300 point version, and kind of see from there who wants to play at what level. So that's the main hobby thing that I've been doing lately. And gaming wise, I think 2 weeks ago, I went to indie tabletop gaming convention, and I brought some Kings of War and Firefight to demo. But ultimately, I ended up being just sucked into playing other games. It wasn't that big of a convention. There were maybe 100 people, max 50 to 100 people, I don't know. And most of the other games, if not all of the other games, were actually the author of the game comes and presents it. And so that was, again, not Mantic, but quite interesting to see what people are doing and play, different games, and chat about mechanics and how to adjust things with the author. So it was pretty cool. But that's about all of my gaming in the past months, between being sick and doing some more work in the house. Not much space for tabletop. So what about you, Chris?
Yeah, but I think, Clem, you were kind of slightly misinformed or about the event, right? So it just wasn't...
Yeah.
It wasn't the kind of thing where people would be interested in a huge company like Mantic, right?
Yeah, not directly. I think maybe so it's just the organizer was my friend, and he invited me to join. He said, even if you don't have a game of your own, you can bring maybe Kings of War or something and just demo that. I think I would have had more success getting demos if I had brought 10 millimeters Kings of War, because that is kind of a different look, a different thing. And when I say I didn't do any Kings of War demos, that's true, but I've also had a bunch of discussions with people, because I've deployed the table, obviously. I've deployed my 2 forces, And so people walked by and said, "Oh, that's nice. What is it?" Or, "Oh, I've heard about this. Oh, let me look at the firefight models. Oh, they're quite nice in real life." The usual discussions of people who kind of have heard about Mantic but never really gave it a try, or saw actual official models in the plastic flesh. And so that's still a positive thing to do. But yeah, ultimately it was not necessarily the best location to do demos, because it was all veterans coming for very indie games, and so Mantic is kind of the big corporation in that context.
Yeah, that's right, buddy. It's been a strange month in terms of Kings of War. I mean, I usually play an awful lot of it, but sadly I haven't had a chance. It's a bit, life, work, but also to some extent I've just been doing other stuff. So I've kind of got 3 massive hobby projects on the go all at the same time, but they're all terrain. So there's the sci-fi fort thing that I'm doing, which is really cool. But I've also done kind of like a kind of fantasy. It's kind of like I got some STLs for like an ancient Greek kind of monument, kind of ruins type, which is a really cool kind of theme. So I've been doing that. And I've also been doing a table for Mythic Americas, which is kind of like Aztec temples / little how I've got 4 or 5 little houses. So I'm going to do a little village. So it's all been very, very cool. But it's been lots of painting with my airbrush or big dry brushes, that kind of thing. So it's been great, but it hasn't done me any Kings of War. I still have a very sad-looking regiment of heart piercers, which are kind of half done, and I've still got about 4 or 5 heart piercer models sitting on my hobby table, looking forlornly at me as I'm doing other things. But I kind of finished my list for Clash of Kings, and then I've kind of half-heartedly done a little bit of other bits and pieces. But until Clash of Kings rolls around, I'm not sure how inspired I'll be to do more Kings of War for the time being. I'm not really interested to do a new army or anything. So for the time being, I'm just off doing other stuff, I suppose.
Well, you have a gaming day in May, Ambush Gaming Day.
Yes, exactly. So we've booked. The next event. Like, I suppose we could say, yeah, why not? It's a tournament. So that's going to happen. Hopefully my friend Caleb will be able to help me with the app and do that bit, because that's the bit that makes me nervous. But anyway, I'll definitely have someone. We've got a few people coming back from Stuttgart, and so that'll be cool. And so that'll come around quick. So it's 3 months after the last one, and let's just see how it goes. But it was very, very fun last time. It really was. So so I'm scrambling around for something to say, but that was cool.
So you will play some Kings of War. Well, also, if you're the ringer, maybe you don't play, but you will be Kings of War involved mid-May.
Yeah, big time. And to be honest, Clash of Kings will come around quick, let's be honest. It's time flies by, so yes. And that was always, it's always not just the best event I've ever been to. Last year at Clash of Kings, it was so far away the best event I've ever been to. It's not even close. And a lot of that is down to, obviously, Steve and the work he does and the venue and all this work he's put into it. But a lot of it is just seeing friends, because obviously Mark Zelensky's coming this time for Clash. And
it's a good weekend away from the usual life, and then you get to play games, but first and foremost, you get to spend good time with good friends.
That's exactly right, buddy.
That's a big thing.
Yeah, so I'll go, just even before the tournament, I'll go and stay for 2 days with my friend Chris in Cheltenham, and we'll have a lovely old time, even before getting to Nottingham, So the whole thing is just a magic week, nearly a week. I think it takes like 6 days. But it's just a great old time, to be honest. So yeah, very much looking forward to that. Oh, and the one thing I haven't mentioned, which is kind of a big deal, speaking of which, is so I've taken this Friday off work, and I am flying at crazy o'clock. I think I've got to be at the airport for about 5 o'clock in the morning. I'm flying to Dublin, and my good friend Kevin is picking me up, and I'm staying at his house. And Tom King is coming over. He's been on the pod a few times. And they've managed to sucker a couple of their friends into playing Kings of War. So we've got a couple of new players, and so I think the wives and kids are all kind of checking out for the weekend. And so the nerds are all coming in. So I think we're going to have a really lovely weekend of rolling dice and making fun of each other and all the rest in Ireland. So I'm super, super looking forward to next weekend.
It sounds like a very exciting program. I mean, it's a perfect excuse to go and visit friends, right? It's kind of like the similar thing for when we came with Sarah to the Frankfurt tournament. It's sure you come to play games, but it's also kind of the social excuse, and then you get to hang out, and it's a big part of why the whole hobby is enjoyable. Yeah,
Exactly.
I just wanted to go back to what you mentioned earlier about you don't feel like making a new army. I think for me it's kind of similar, although I have a bit of intention to revisit older armies still. Do you think you will also just do other systems, other things, or do you also want to revisit older Kings of War armies? Like, what Kings of War army will you play in, 26 or something, or late 25?
Oh, I think you're absolutely right, Clem. I mean, this year's all about the Trident Realms, and I think that is my favourite army, really, with the Northern Alliance being kind of a close second, I'd say. But no, I think you're absolutely right, Clem. I mean, we did our Salamanders armies together a couple of years ago for the pod. And when I look at that now, I'm kind of cringe slightly of like, it was okay for the time, but I wouldn't play that on the table now. So you're absolutely right, buddy. That will definitely be a thing going forward, will be just kind of me getting armies out of their boxes and making them so I'm happy with them now and sort of getting a new enjoyment out of them. Because I think at times I've also got Riftforge Orcs. I mean, I think I did armies so incredibly quickly, I didn't really stop to think much about it. And then by the time I was finishing that, I was already on to the next thing. So that kind of weird sort of ADHD kind of compulsion to just desperately get things done for some reason has kind of passed now for whatever reason. So I think you're absolutely right.
Old age.
Yeah, quite possibly. Middle age. So partly, yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Clem. Getting more fun and value out of the things I have already bought is definitely going to be a big thing for me going forward. I'm just making sure that I actually squeeze out some value out of these things because, some armies, I mean, I got my Emperor Dust, I got my Salamanders. I got the Salamanders, did them, and then everyone was saying how good they were. And I was like, oh, no, I want to distance myself a bit from this. But I also did the Twilight Kin, Clem, I mean, so there's kind of 3 or 4 armies, like big armies I did very, very quickly. I think within 12 months I did all 4. So, yeah, I've played them literally a handful of times each. I took Empire of Dust to Clash, obviously, but yeah, I was just starting to sort of get to grips with Surge, and then I was off doing something else again. So I think you're absolutely right, Clem. Just making sure we actually get value out of, because there's always the hard sell for us to buy more models, right? And I'm a sucker for it as much as anybody. The number of emails we get from hobby companies or Kickstarters saying, don't miss out. And actually, maybe it'll do me good to miss out and just enjoy what I have and, just not feel that pressure to keep spending loads of money on toy soldiers to some extent,
Yeah. Every now and then missing out and spending more time on what you already have is probably
exactly.
not
and
for
then
the worst.
And then when you do buy stuff, it will hopefully feel all the more significant, and I won't have that slightly guilty feeling of like, I've just spent €250 on Warcrow and I haven't even opened the box yet. Do you know what I mean, Clem? It's that kind of
Yeah, buying is to some extent is the easiest part, right? Like it just takes, do I have some money, or maybe you actually cannot really afford it, but you can still spend it, right? And then you just spend it and then it's done, versus time to assemble it and time to paint it and then get rules and schedule games.
You spend the money and then you have all the excitement that, something's coming in the post, or, you have to go into your local friendly gaming store to buy it. And, you have that dopamine rush of like, oh, the doorbell rings. Oh, that's my models. Opening the box and such. So, yes,
I know very well. Yes. I mean, it's interesting, though, that you say this, because when I think about my past month, and maybe even a couple of months, I haven't bought that much stuff. I'm trying to think now, but I think I've bought paints. I've bought magnets for something. But I haven't made that many purchases. And to be honest, I'm also not so sure right now what I would be doing for my next Kings of War army. I think one reason, in a way, or an interesting fact, is we have no idea what is on the release calendar for Kings of War right now. Because the past, 6 months or something like this, since Clash, we knew there was some Basilian cavalry coming, and that was about it. And so now we've seen the Basilian cavalry, which, by the way, was an interesting realization to see. They have done just one plastic kit, new plastic kit for the army. So I was kind of expecting, sisterhood stuff or something like this.
I was expecting 2, because two is normally what sees to happen, as far as I can tell.
Right, that's what they've been doing in the past, and so in a way that they've done just one this time, it makes sense when you look at the context and the releases they've done around it and so on. But again, what is the next exciting thing to come out for Kings of War? Well, if you put Champions aside, because Champions is kind of a different thing, we don't know. We don't know what is the next faction. Is it Undeads, like someone, I don't remember who or where, said?
And will it be in 4th edition, Clem?
Will it be in 4th edition directly? Will there be another army at some point? Like we've got the Forces of the Abyss last year, so around the time they normally release Clash of Kings. We don't know. So I guess that's another reason to, not really know or not really make decisions about it. And to be fair, we're late March, early April, so it's a bit soon to think about what am I going to do late 25. It's in quite a while. So yeah, no, it's a interesting thing to think about. I think for me also now, I just want to play more with my Force of the Abyss and not directly switch to thinking about the next project. But yeah, no, it's interesting topic.
One thing I'll mention as well is I think it's kind of been unofficially reiterated by Mantic, is that people are getting a little bit nervous whether their armies are going to be valid for 4th edition. And one thing I've heard is 99%, if you have an army with Mantic models in, that will be safe, for the most part. So 99%, if you've got armies that have Mantic models, you'll be absolutely fine. I just wanted to throw that out there. Gerry, what about you, buddy?
It's an interesting one, because I have just so many armies that are half done, not done, undone. I don't think we've seen the last of the Basileans, to be brutally honest. I think the only reason we are looking at it as one kit is because if it just came out in the Champions box, people would go, oh, why can I not get it for Kings of War now? So I think that it's popped up earlier than anticipated, because the Paladin Knights mounted now in hard plastic, but the Paladin Knights on foot are still PVC, and I think they're still trying to remove PVC from their range. So I think we actually may get a big Paladin Basilean release this year, where we see some of a second hard plastic set anyway, if not a third as well. I think it would be madness not to do foot Paladins when you've already got the model sculpted, because we've seen the T-poses were used for the cavalry, in which case I might go back to my Basileans in that regard. I have a very infantry-heavy army anyway, made up of other figures that I've collected over the years. But I think that may be a big one coming down the line. Beyond that, into later this year,
that would be an interesting one. right? Like they would do a kind of a split release for Basilian. But you're right, they didn't really announce, okay, this is the Basilian release and that's it. The thing that kind of had me, wondering was they've already released the Mega Army and Army boxes for Basilians. And so it would be weird to see them come up with one or two more plastic kits this year and, have to update the Mega Army and Army boxes again. But maybe they could do it with a updated ambush box because they haven't put the cavalry guys in the ambush box. And right now it's still the normal infantry, I think. Is there even a Basilian ambush box? I think there is with the
There is one, buddy, yeah.
the basic infantry guys. But it's just one sprue in there.
Yes.
I mean,
it's just
what
the
type of
infantry.
sprue?
So you can build the crossbowmen or the guys with spears and shields or something.
Right.
But you're right.
I see.
It's, yeah.
And I mean, that would be a prime candidate to do Sisters as the ambush box, and then they could introduce new plastics via that. I still think the best bet for the Sisters is to go the halfling route. A couple of sprues in the box, and it makes 5 cavalry and 10 infantry, same as the halflings. And then that way, they could actually double down on a couple of different units without having to do multiple different releases. But, who knows? We'll see in future. Because I know there's none of the Sisters are in any of the army box sets.
Yeah, I didn't even check that. But yeah, the Sisters anyway are PVC models at the moment. They come from Vanguard. So you can have them from the vault. Like they've released the STRs for them. If I'm not mistaken, not for everything. Like the Gur Panthers, I think you cannot get through the vault yet. But that would be a very good point. If there are no Sisters on those Mega Army or in Army boxes, then perhaps that opens up a possibility for later Wave 2 release. My point mostly was just, I don't think we've heard anything of or had any kind of teasers about which faction comes next, or if there ever will be a Basilians Wave 2. I'm kind of curious about this. That's about it. It doesn't go much deeper.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking as well, a Sisterhood ambush box would be amazing. I think that would be really cool. And Basilia is not necessarily a faction I've been that interested in, but actually, if there were new Sisterhood models, I think that would be really cool. Because I think you could have beautiful and very unique looking army. And Gerry, you mentioned obviously you were doing your ogres from the original Kickstarter earlier. Are you also having this kind of pull to just kind of get old projects over the line?
Partly, yes. Every year we do a thing over at Beast of War called the Spring Clean Challenge that runs from the first day of spring to the last day of spring. So started on Friday last week, 21st, goes all the way through until the Saturday the 20th of June, I think is the last day. Anyway, but it's 3 months of everybody has half-finished projects or projects they did years ago that have gone nowhere, or maybe stuff they've done and go, you know what, I'm better now. I could go back and maybe instead of just dry brushing, I add some washes or add a bit of highlights or, put some waterslide transfers and decals on things, whatever it happens to be. So we encourage the sort of community to get in and find stuff like that. And because my ogres were always meant to be a quick and nasty army, it was all block colours, and then army painter dip was the key. So it should have been something that was finished within the space of a couple of months and then has languished for 14 years, is it? No?
Yikes.
Less, 12. Whenever it was literally went down the line of mega armies for the Kings of War first edition Kickstarter and went, I want an ogre mega army and a couple of others. And very few of them have ever made it anywhere near completion. So I like the idea of going back and rather than buying a load of stuff, actually getting an army dusted off and built up. I mean, for a long time I've had siege breakers that I converted because there weren't any. Now, Mantic have finally obviously released figures for them, but they don't match the rest of the army because they're the new big stocky ogres with big chunky legs and stuff. And I quite like the fact that I've got several hordes of siege breakers that are unique to me with their big round hoplite shield that I got from a Rackham model and cast. It's like everybody gets this shield. So, yeah, I think sometimes a refresh and finishing off something is as valid, if not more so, than going out and starting a whole new army. Because what's it they say? Everything old is new again. And sometimes when things have been sitting around for so long that people have forgotten that you've even got them, it can just really give you the sort of impetus to get it on the table and start playing again.
Hi, this is Alessio Cavatore, and you're listening to the Mantic Universe podcast.
And funnily enough, I've had the exact same thing the last couple of weeks where my friend Caleb messaged me to say, hey, Chris, do you fancy playing Age of Sigmar Spearmint, we're calling it, but I think it's Spearpoint or something. It's the kind of, you buy a box.
Spearhead,
thank you, buddy. Anyway, Age of Sigmar Spearmint. So you buy this kind of starter box, which is similar to a Champions box, really, in terms of number of models, etc. And you get a couple of about 4 different units in there. Now, I'm not going to buy a new box for something silly like €140, but it turns out I have everything I need to play the game. The rules are free online, which is, not like GW, so that's pretty impressive. But I have all the models, and all I had to do was I had, I think, a squad of kind of Chaos Warriors or Khorne Warriors or whatever they're called, and 3 of the kind of cavalry guys. They were all primed and just sitting in my pile of shame. So I was like, well, if anyone else had asked, I'd have said, no, Caleb, I'm not playing Age of Sigmar, you absolute lunatic, what's wrong with you? But because it's Caleb, and every time I go to Caleb, hey, Caleb, do you want to play a game of Firefight? Sure. Do you want to play, anyway, he's awesome. So, so I've tried to get those guys painted up, but they are incredible. I really, really love those models, but they are incredibly fiddly. So I've put tons and tons of time into them, and they're still not finished. And then the big blow I had was I got some Vallejo crackle paint because they're all on kind of lava-y bases, and I put this. Gerry, you might be able to help me here. I put the Vallejo crackle paint onto the bases, obviously to make it look like crackland with lava peeking through the cracks underneath. But I think it's the way I applied it. So I basically applied it quite thickly to the bases and then spread it around. And it did crackle a little bit, but didn't crackle very much. So instead I have, very dark brown bases with a tiny bit of lava showing through. So it's been a massive failure. So I've had to repaint the bases white and start again. But I think the issue was apparently, because Caleb's tried this before, and he said what I should have done is gloop the crackle paint on, but not spread it out. And so I'm going to do a test base like an absolute coward and see if that helps. But yeah, it was apparently the way I applied the crackle paint that
definitely a new man doing test models. I wonder who is here.
Well, no, because I'm already having to repaint like 30 bases again. I mean, it's not 30, but not far off 30. So, yeah, exactly. Who is this guy doing test bases like a coward? Okay, Gerry shared a link with to there. Dear listener, go to Beasts of War.
The link is behind a paywall, but you can get a 30-day trial. But I actually did a test on doing lava basing. You'll be able to see just from the image at the bottom of the 3 different bases. One of them uses PVA glue as the crackle medium, and it is by far and away the cheapest one to do. And then 2 of them use an actual crackle paint. One is a miniatures crackle paint, and one is an artist's crackle paint for doing mixed medium canvases, that sort of thing. And I mean, you can see there that they come up a treat, even without going into the video. But yes, thicker is generally better, but you don't always have to go thick. But it's a little tutorial I did just showing how you can do lava basing, and it's one that I plan on using for my abyssals because I really like the look of it, and I have my abyssal dwarves have a mix of lava in places and the regular dirt as if they've just arrived and have started to explode the world, whereas the abyssals, the world arrives pre-exploded whenever they come.
Gerry, there's a very first comment on this link you shared. It's just so you. So Gerry's reply, so someone says basically, your bases look awesome. And Gerry's reply is, it's more paint than most of my bases get. Untouched, alone, forgotten.
It's harsh but fair past
It's just
me.
this
Harsh but fair.
beautiful nihilistic poetry within, models. Perfect. So Gerry, did I apply it wrong then, do you think, from my description of what I did with Crackle Paint?
I'm not sure which one you were using. Generally, thicker is better. However, the trickiest part or the most annoying part is getting the paint on top of the crackle layer, because you paint your base, you put a crackle medium on top, and then you have to paint the top of that. And obviously, if it's some of the crackle sort of stuff is relatively viscous, but it's still liquid, so you're having to airbrush on or spray on over the top of it. And then you need to do it and then leave it alone for it to actually split and crack to get the best effect. That's why out of those three, because obviously you can see the picture, people at home can't, but you've got a top right, a bottom right, and then one sort of in the middle on the left. The top right one with the massive gouge down it, that was the PVA glue. And it was the easiest to put a top layer on, even if you just happen to hit it with a spray can of black once you've got your PVA down. But you needed to be thinking of that when it cracks, when it dries, it shrinks and cracks. The bottom one was a very thin layer and looks more like crazy paving. But again, it comes down to the particular one you're using. So thicker is generally better, but they're all still a real pain in the backside to actually get your paint on top.
Yeah, I mean, I've used the GW version for black, so I didn't paint after applying it. So I've just painted basically lava colors on the base and put the stuff on top after and just let it to dry. I might have varnished it. I don't remember now because it was an army for a friend. And the thickness dictated how big the pieces were once it dries and crackles. So if you have it relatively thin, like almost to a normal thickness for paint, it would do tiny speckles of crackle. And if you go thicker, it would do bigger pieces that look more like, what you want for lava. So I guess I was mocking you, Chris, but doing some experiments with whichever, paint or paste or whatever technical solution you use really makes sense to see what type of results you get from it and then adjust your parameters. Because it is a big pain in the rear if you have to repaint all of the stuff, especially if it's the last step you do. You've painted the models and everything, and then you take care of the bases at the very end, and then something goes wrong and you need to redo the base. It's painful, but that's an interesting thing to play with. The good part though is it looks really nice when it's finished.
But it's lava, so I spent a really, really long time doing wet blending, trying to make it look nicer, and I did lots and lots of layers to trying to make it look smooth. And I just finally got to the point where I thought it kind of tricked my eye to think maybe that is lava, and then I killed it with the crackle paint. So, like a coward, I will try test model, guys. What have I become? Perfect, super, guys. So, I think we've done pretty well out of that section, considering we've hardly done any Kings of War stuff this month. So,
true
guys,
professionals.
Yes. So we'll move on to Panelor. Basilians. You say Basilian, I say Basilian. Guys, let's be honest with themselves. Who has done the reading?
I have not.
Gerry, have you done the reading?
I have done the reading, yes.
Okay, thank goodness. One of us has done the reading. Okay, fantastic. So, Gerry, so Basilians, they are the kind of poster boy good guys, but they are not that good.
Yeah, that's one way of putting it. So, if anybody's ever played D&D and their GM has asked them to define whether they were lawful good, lawful neutral, chaotic good, neutral, that 3x3 grid where you have the different types of characteristic, and it's very difficult to explain what those actually mean in terms of game and character. The Basileans are nailed on for lawful good, and they can be one of the worst types of character to be, insofar as if somebody has a cancer, the default setting would be to cut it out, and the easiest way, if it's in the arm, is just to remove all of the arm from the shoulder. It may seem aggressive, but it gets the job done, and the Basileans are very much like that. They claim to be the inheritors of the sort of golden age of mankind from Primovantor, the great world-spanning empire of humanity that was at the very peak of civilization when the God War came and winter attacked.
Gerry, before you move on to this bit, I'll just interrupt you. So am I reading this right? They're perfectly willing to do evil acts if it's for the greater good.
No. They're perfectly willing to do good acts that other people may define as evil.
Yeah, they don't see it as evil thing. It's just they will burn down a village that has been corrupted because, well, it's a good thing to do if you don't like the corrupted village.
Yeah, so
if you're a villager, it kind of sucks because you still burn.
Yeah, exactly. So this is a good example, right? So let's say, for example, there was a necromancer in the village. They would think it was perfectly legitimate to turn up to the village, and potentially a lot of good people might die. A lot of the peasants might die at the hands of the Basileans.
Sure.
But in doing so, the Basileans wouldn't view that as an evil act. They'd see that as just, the cost of doing business, getting the job done, all the rest
100%.
of it, right?
Completely justified. And to this day, within the Golden Horn and the likes, there would still occasionally be sort of the satanic panic scare that maybe some people are heretics, maybe some people are communicating with the wicked ones, and when this sort of goes round the villages or round the streets within an area, hundreds of people and families, when they're denounced by their next door neighbour, they get dragged off to the pools and just drowned bodily in them. So they have massive pools where you would normally have something like a consecration or baptism within the Basilean faith, and they also then just turn into ways of execution when the sort of fever is up. But they never really see it as a bad thing, because clearly somebody would step in. The fact that they know their gods exist and they're on their side is a very dangerous thing for the Basilean people.
Yeah,
because if
that's
nobody
a
stops
really
you,
interesting point.
how bad could it be?
Yeah, that's a really, really interesting point. So they know empirically they are on the side of good, right? There's no halfway about it. They are definitely, literally fighting on the side of good.
Yeah, I mean that comes back from, like I was saying, their initial founding, where after winter was defeated and whole sections of their empire were washed away, very little was left, and they were sort of beset on all sides. A massive orc host was coming down, and it was at that point that the current leader of the humans within the realm essentially gave himself to the Shining Ones. It's like, come help my people survive and we will give ourselves over to you. And at that point, a Shining One appeared and went, say that again, but mean it, and seal the deal with your own blood. And he did this thing. He cut his hand, pressed it into the muddy earth beneath him, and all of a sudden an angelic host of Elohai arrived and absolutely decimated the orc horde that was outnumbering humanity. And from that point on, the the humans within Basileia are now tied to the Shining Ones, the Elohi, to an extent that the ancient empire was a republic where people were voted into office, and now Basileia is a theocracy. The leader is the head of the church. Everything is pushed and built around the fact that they are, as they see themselves, the inheritors of this ancient empire, but also they are in lockstep with the Shining Ones against all things evil within the world of Panathor.
So this is really interesting, Gerry, right? So, we talk about people doing a deal with the devil and selling their souls. Well, they've sold their souls to the angels, basically, but the end result is actually arguably not that brilliant. I mean, they had a democracy. Well, you don't have that anymore because, we've sold our souls.
There is a fantastic film that I would suggest people go and watch called The Prophecy. I won't say anything else about it, but it's based on Earth and angels are real. And at one point, a police detective gives this sort of question to one of the other characters. He goes, would you ever actually want to meet an angel? Have you ever thought about what that person would be? A whole life spent worshipping your creator, but with one wing dipped in blood. Whenever he needed a killing, the firstborn destroyed, an army decimated, he would send an angel. And that, in essence, is what Basileia is. A whole life spent worshipping and subjugating other people for the greater good of humanity.
And it's Basileia. The Old Testament rather than the New Testament, by the sound of it.
Very, very much so. And it's very easy to take sort of little steps towards evil in that regard, if people want to think of it in those sort of stark terms, where if they are the only bulwark against the abyss and against the wicked ones, then why shouldn't the rest of humanity be supporting them? If they need paladins on the line or soldiers there to defend, then other nations really should be paying tolls for that. They should be paying for the protection that Basileia gives them. And you can see how it wouldn't take much for them to suddenly go off the rails.
I think one question I have about Basileia is, how do we expect a standard Basileia army to look like? And it's kind of a loaded question because I'm looking for justification to say, you play only Elohi, all flying, and it's not a good Basileia army. So am I wrong in thinking the Elohis should be pretty rare in the lists?
It's a difficult one because depending on how they view the conflict in question, obviously they're not press-ganged soldiers, the Elohi. They can come and go when they please. So if a whole host of them arrive, there must be a very good reason. Maybe somebody in the opposite army really shouldn't be able to survive this because what they will do will be much more damaging. So from a gameplay point of view, you can justify a ton of winged party boys arriving. But from the point of view of the nation state itself, obviously they are relatively small these days compared to others, but they're elite. You have your paladins who are sort of closest to tapping directly into that sort of holy power for good. And it does make it makes claims that if they're on a battlefield that they shouldn't be, or if the cause isn't as just as they imagine it is, that their power actually decreases until they get the message. You're not on the side of right in this battle, so maybe there is still a bit of a balancing factor in there from some of those up on high. But otherwise you have a very fanatical religious zealotry running throughout the ranks, from your basest men-at-arms through to the actual Elohi, or we're seeing essentially somebody like a god coming down themselves. And you can always purge with fire, which is good. But depending on your point of view, you've got a lot of room within Basileia for different types of armies. I've already mentioned that I have a Paladin Heavy army, which uses 5 infantry regiments at its core. And I don't think anybody else in the world plays 5 infantry regiments of Paladins. But I just really like the look of that serried ranks. Other people want to push more of the knightly orders, and then you've obviously got the very fast sisterhood in there as well, who are zealots of a different type. Don't really need armor if you're just going to move quickly and destroy whatever's in your path. But overall, you have a dynamic, aggressive force. They're not particularly defensive, but because they are having to deal with all of the things that are happening in the world, they are now starting to look outside of their own subjects and their own areas to a certain extent. With the fall of the watchtowers around the edge of the abyss and the collapse of the Brotherhood, the fact that they've taken half of those under their wing and have re-established some sort of fortifications and watchtowers, some people may see that as a good thing. All of a sudden, here's the Basileans helping out. A more cynical person would say they don't want to lose their own people on the front line, and they are supporting that part of the Brotherhood as a early warning system and speed bump. If anything comes out of the abyss again, they're not going to lose their own people in the initial defense, but maybe somebody will get back in time to warn them so that they can actually put together their own army further back. So they are, I'm not saying they're definitely using people like the Brotherhood, but they're not exactly melding them into the actual ranks and file of the Basilean people currently and the army that they have. They're still sort of separate and distinct in that regard.
Gerry, I love the idea of you having a load of paladins. I think it's really cool. That one of the things I think that doesn't kind of help the perception of the army is so many players. It's not a massively popular army, and I think it really ought to be. But one of the things that doesn't help, I think, is so many players just take all battle angels all the time. And if for example, in Steps to Deliverance, there's good guys, poor peasants out on the edges of the empire fighting for their lives, and they're getting basically no help from the fancy people in the capital with all the money and resources. And it's only when spoiler alert for Steps to Deliverance, only when one of them turns evil out of kind of desperation, really, and very understandable reasons, that then the big army turn up to not help him, let's say. But I thought that was a very compelling idea, this idea that there are loads of people who, they would never ever see an angel. 99.99%. I think, Gerry, am I right in thinking that when they're not fighting in battles, they're all hanging out on a mountain near the Golden Horn? Is that right?
Yeah, the remnant of Primavantor, the only 2 cities that didn't sort of get washed away post Winter's flood, is where they more or less concentrate all of their power. And you're right in that it's an army that should be more front and center. There aren't a huge amount of human paladin-centric fantasy armies out there for any game, really. Whenever you look at a lot of the fantasy games, humanity tends to be dungers for the most part. They may have knightly orders attached, but actually having a nailed-on fantasy paladin-based army, these should be the poster boys for Panathor, as far as I'm concerned.
I completely agree with you. Yeah, I completely, even more than Northern Lights, yeah. Yeah,
and pushing them front and centre. I mean, regardless of the fact that they may or may not be the nicest people in the world, they're very Space Marine-like in that regard. They're good when what they're doing is happening far away from you, but when it's on your own doorstep, they're still good, but you may be a casualty from their excessive goodness. And that's just how these things sort of pan out. But I really like the aesthetic. I like what they've done with the new Paladin Knights and hopefully infantry as well. The men-at-arms, I think, look fantastic. Leaps and bounds beyond the old men-at-arms. And then still having areas to go back and refine, so the sisters and even the Elohi if they need to. It's such a distinctive army that could really be the sort of poster boy for Kings of War and for Panathor, putting them up against the likes of the Abyssals, which the range there has sort of come on leaps and bounds with the Lord of Lies recently as well. Thinking that this is what you want to see. You want to see the physical presence of the Shining and Wicked Ones still duking it out on Panathor, looking for leverage and looking for a way up. And I think they're sort of missing out by not making that front and centre. I'd be very disappointed if, when fourth rolls around, that they are not the go-to army for the box set.
Completely agree with you, Gerry. I was kind of thinking maybe Undead for the 2-player box set, but Basilia for the plot, for everything else, it needs to be front and centre. It needs to be the face of Kings of War, to be honest. And I think it's fallen by the wayside a little bit. I'm sure that's due to sales. But I think they need to think of some really cool ideas. As you say, Gerry, if you've got the Lord of Lies and an army of beautifully painted demons, and then on the other side of that, just imagine on a lava mat or something, and the remains of the Brotherhood Watchtower or something, and then facing against them, you've got this kind of gleaming, shield wall of paladins. The battle at the beginning of the Lord of the Rings where they explain the Last Alliance. It's kind of like, looking like that perhaps with a massive battle angel facing down the Lord of Lies or something. And to me, that would just look so amazing. I mean, let's be honest, a lot like the Lord of the Rings, but in a very good way.
With its own twist.
We talk a lot about Warpath, where Clem, you and I have, GCPS against Plague, and we kind of feel like just looking at that table tells a story, and the story is awesome. You don't need any more information than that. It's just so thematic, and it's just brilliant. And I think we need to have that for Kings of War. And I think Gerry's absolutely right. That is these holy knights facing off against, whether it's undead or demons, doesn't matter, but they need to be front and centre for Kings of War. Clem.
Yeah. One thing is the Basilia is already the poster boy for Armada, for example, right? And I think from my small perspective, one thing that has hurt Basilia in the game is that most people will build a list that uses basically 0 models from the Mega Army or Army Box. And so that can't be a good thing, right, for the game or for Mantic in general. And I think that's kind of why also I'm not a big fan of Eloi only armies, because usually when you see one of these, none of the models are Mantic models, and it kind of, I think, goes away from what you just described that I would very much like to see. So yeah, it will be interesting.
I mean, Clem, there's loads of 3D printed like Battle Angel models, and let's be honest, loads of people are going to be using Age of Sigmar Stormcast Eternal models for Battle Angels. It's too similar, so maybe, I don't know. I mean, there's got to be something Mantic can do to kind of distinguish themselves somehow in that, in that very crowded field. But also, that is just one unit, and I think that one unit has come to dominate Kings of War armies in a way it really shouldn't, in terms of lore or all these other business reasons. Also, I don't think it's healthy for anyone that there are these armies which are all Alohi, all flying, attacking stuff. I don't think that's fun to play against. It means people aren't buying Mantic models. I mean, I have some of them. There are some Alohi models, but to be honest, they are very old and they are not Mantic's best models. Let's put it that way. So yeah, I think we need to get away from these angels and to have more balanced, more like Kings of War. Like more cavalry, more paladins. And just having an awesome-looking army, because honestly, I don't think a full army of Alohi actually looks particularly good or interesting anyway, to be quite honest with you. Anyway, I don't know what you guys think.
It's quite a bit, it's quite specific in a way, and it also feels like, that's what you got to play. I remember also at some point, many of the Basilians' army were, how are they called? The ogres, the palace guards. Like 3 hordes of palace guards.
Similar
and
problem,
then some
buddy.
Elois, and then a few things around.
You may as well play ogres at that point, right? Yeah. And there's Gerry on his own doing a cool thing with his regiments of paladins just because he thinks they're cool, you know. But I don't know. I mean, that's if there was one criticism, maybe of third edition, it's that, you know, players better than me often say that infantry are in a tough spot because speed is so important. And perhaps that's true. So who knows, with the rules tweaking for 4th edition, maybe they can find a sweet balance there. I don't know. But yes, but I completely agree with Gerry. I'd love to see a really cool wall of shields and spears and swords and these religious warriors. It sounds really, really fantastic. And I think as well they would be, or they could potentially be, you could do all non-metallic metals and spend, 8 hours and hours on every model, but you could also
I won't be doing that.
But you could spray paint them black and then dry brush them silver and then call it a day,
Much more likely.
So dudes in armor, is not a hard army to paint unless you want it to be.
You can do different levels of it.
Yeah.
The Mantic Universe podcast. So much universe and so little time.
I also like the fact that you can back up infantry with things like the heavy arbalests, so they're ranged, essentially a bolt thrower equivalent. And yes, I'm not particularly fast moving, but with 3 of those on the table, it certainly gives your opponent pause for thought. Because if they don't move in quickly into your big wall of delightful paladins, then they're going to get shot to bejesus and back. I will say the fact that Ogre Palace Guard are a thing it's nice, and I know Mantic wanted to get away from numbered units, you're limited 1 or limited 2 or that sort of thing, with the exception of named characters. But I think Ogre Palace Guard are too much of a crutch. Because if you can have ogres who also have Iron Resolve and full plate, why would you not? And again, it has that sort of feel where here's an army of humanity, but it's going to be made up of nothing but ogres and angels. Where's humanity in that?
Exactly. And then it loses the essence of the army. It doesn't feel... And to me, that just ogres and angels, it doesn't feel like a particularly compelling thing. It just sounds like someone's taken 2 things because they're good and chucked them on the table. And let's be honest, that's exactly what's happened. So, yeah, I think they need to get back to these religious warriors. They should be the heart of the army. That whether it's the ladies, and I love the idea of the sisterhood. I think it's a great idea. But they need to get back to what makes this a compelling army, quite frankly. I think we're in agreement. Cool. And one point I'm going to make on the podcast, which is not something I normally... So I'm going to say something positive about GW guys, is that they've just announced they've teased their old world. One of the new armies coming is called Grand Cathay, which I think was an army that was in the books, but they never had models for in the old game. And I think these models look great. I'm just going to...
Yeah, it's in the computer game as well.
Oh, is it the computer game, Clem? Okay, interesting.
Yeah,
but
they come, from what I understand, because I've never played it, at least not more than 5 minutes to realize I just understand how it works and my computer is too old for it. But a lot of the unit design and the art direction and so on was an investment that was done for the computer game quite a while ago. And so it's kind of like Asia, Chinese inspired, and they're cool models. In a way, it's interesting because it looks kind of okay with the rest of the old world models, like a more old school sculpts in a way, but a bit more modern. And but yeah, it's a good diversity. And obviously, it's on a different scale to what Mantic can do. Like they're releasing 10 different kits, more than that. So it's a bit harsh to compare this, the volume of the release. But,
no, in terms of the models, Clem, it looks like you've got your infantry, you've got swords and boards, you've got spears, you've got some cavalry, you've got a couple of different war machines. So it's to be honest, it's kind of what I want to see for Basilia, rather than getting away from that. Oh, angels and ogres, that's or I want to see an all ladies army, which would be awesome. And I appreciate Mantic won't have the money for the tooling to do all of this in hard plastics. But who knows? I mean, maybe if they did, let's say, for example, they focused on the Paladins now, this release, and then maybe in a couple of years they came back and then did the Sisterhood side of things. That would be cool. If they communicate and explain that in advance what their plan was, if that makes sense. Because if you can't do it all in one go, maybe do it in 2 goes.
Yeah, for a 4th edition starter, have like another wave of plastics for Basilian. That would make sense for me. And I hope, Gerry, you're right, and we will see some more kits within a year for Basilian, and it won't just stick to the knights that we have seen. But let's see.
Nice.
All right.
Cool. Right, should we move on to listener questions?
Let's go for it.
We have one from Wolfgang. Hey, Wolfgang. Do you think the release of Kings of War Champions indicates a release of Kings of War 4 in 2026, not 2025? Or exactly the kind of release which seems a rather big fantasy release stretched over many months with new plastic units? Which one would rather had expected this year with a new edition of Kings of War? Okay, so it's sort of a question and sort of prediction as I understand it. So I think, do you guys, I think it's, particularly with Kings of War Champions getting a new box every month, my guess would be that Kings of War 4th edition would be coming in 2026. What do you guys think?
Yes, I mean, for me, that made sense already from the moment that they said they want a bit more time to rework some of the things, or tackle more deep questions that take more than the yearly cycle that they have for the Clash of Kings books. And Clash of Kings usually comes out, late October, November? And so if you add time to this timeline, then you're very quickly into 26. And so for me, it was pretty clear. It was my main bet that 4th edition would come sometime in 26, or I would have seen as quite a surprise to see it in 25. At this stage, we don't have much more information about where they are in the development process. They must be right at the heart of it, right? Given the timeline of such projects.
Clem, I will just say on the pod that we genuinely have no inside information on this at all. So we are purely speculating. Yeah,
of course. Yeah, no, it's just to me it makes sense, and we've said it a few times as well. It's not like the game desperately needs a new edition yesterday to become relevant again. I think 3rd edition, or edition 3.5 rather, like the big the companion, the Beat Red book, and additional Clash of Kings since then. I think it's the game is in a good state, and people are happy with this, or majority of people are happy with this currently. And it's not like we're demanding we want it right now. And so I'd rather they take their time to get it right than rush it out.
My particular worry about 4th edition is that the community, or at least loud people in the community, seem to want very different things out of a new edition. So, as an example, some people are absolutely adamant 4th edition is going to be a slash and burn of a lot of the factions that they think shouldn't necessarily be in there. But other people obviously absolutely don't want that, and that would be a big red flag for them. So yeah, I think the key is that Mantic don't, and to their credit, they're not. They don't rush it. We have seen other game editions in the last couple of years come out, and they've caused more problems than they've had solutions to, if that makes sense. So yeah, I think that makes sense. And in terms of releases, I think we're all for 4th edition having Basileans. I mean, really what I think you want for a new edition is, yes, of course, you want to people to be able to play their existing armies for the new edition of the game and to be excited to do that. But it's such a great excuse to have a lovely 2-player box set to get you to buy a new army, So if there's beautiful Basilean and Abyss or Basilean and Undead, I don't really care, but something like that would be with a classic archetypal goodie, even if they are kind of so good they're bad, and an archetypal baddie. So you and your friend go, right, I'll take the Basileans, you take the Undead, and there's new models to tempt us to buy it. Because, as we said with the champion stuff earlier, the new hero models are gorgeous, but I own everything else in that box 10 times over. So, do I really want to pay €50 for one model and the rules? So, yeah.
If you play GW games, then yes, you would. No, but jokes apart, I think another parameter to keep in mind is if they do it right, 4th edition will not just talk to the current players. It should, from a business perspective, but also for the long-term evolution of the game, it should bring new people in as well. And so I think it's kind of not the right way to look at it to only consider, okay, what do people who already play Kings of War want? Because in a lot of cases, what people will say, and I've heard this comment from some people in my local group, is, well, I'm perfectly happy with what we have now. Why would we even get a new edition? And so, and I kind of share this feeling to some extent. And so, in a way, you're not doing 4th edition for these people. You're doing for all the people that are not yet playing the game. And so, or I think, at least from a business perspective. And so, perhaps, yes, they should listen to what the community already says. Like, I don't want to ruin it. Get something out that no one wants and fails to recruit new players and makes the current players dissatisfied. That would be the worst case scenario. But at the same time, I think, why call it a new edition if you don't, to some extent do also some new things or consolidate some things? And I'm not saying removing armies by consolidating things, because removing armies, I think, is the worst thing they could be doing. Like, it really is a feel bad moment. So there would have to be very, very good reasons for them to do that. But yeah, I guess in a way, I hope they really take the time to think through the whole topic and create a really good game that is still Kings of War, but that is something new at the same time. If
Gerry.
that makes sense.
Yeah, I think with new editions, companies view new editions as a way to get excess sales or extra sales. And it's been that way for a while with a few companies, Warlords, GW notably. And I'm not saying I hate it, but what I am saying is there needs to be a good reason to do it. So a 4th edition, if it brings something worthwhile and relevant to the game, fantastic. I mean, Command Dice is going to be a big one, whether it gets included or not. I think that's what a lot of people will be watching out for. And then where the errata and the rules that have been added over the last few years go. The funny thing about this edition will be 3rd came out in 2019, and then within 8 weeks, the world locked down for about 3 years. So it doesn't feel like we've actually had a full run at 3rd edition. There was an awful lot of time where people just weren't playing any games at all. And if that's the case, I don't mind them holding on until 2026 or 2027 even, before they release a 4th edition. I mean, by all means, they could do a clean up and release the rules that we have with the errata, with the various Clash of Kings bits and pieces added into their Command Dice, whatever it happens to be. They could do that.
A blue book. They've done green, they've done red. The next one should be blue. Although blue, there's already a special shade of blue for rank and flank is already taken. But
it's Lord of the Rings DVD boxes.
Yeah, that type of thing. So it'll be interesting. I mean, we know one will come because Mantic rely on it to a certain extent for the company. But because we haven't had a massive amount of rumours percolating that it's all coming, either it means that their NDAs are particularly good, but I'd much rather they didn't try and force it out in a window at the end of this year just to maintain a schedule, quote unquote. And if that means we don't actually see a fourth until summer next year, great. It won't make any difference to me. If the fourth edition when it arrives is better, different, whatever, I'll give it a go. And like some of your friends, Clem, if it turns out that it's a step in the wrong direction for me and the very small group I play with, we'll just stay on third. You know, it's that people get too caught up in what companies do. Companies have to make decisions to make money, whether it's decreasing points cost, increasing ranges, releasing new books, or whatever it happens to be. And people seem to think that if they want to keep playing the game, then they have to play by whatever the current rule set by the company is. And a long time before GW blew up the world, we'd already decided to stop at the previous edition because the last edition, prior to exploding, they added all sorts of nonsense like random charge movement. And when a dwarf infantry unit is outcharging knights because you happen to get a bad dice roll and they got a really good one, you know, it's nonsense. So for a game to survive, it has to be a game the community want to play. And there are plenty of examples of games out there where the community have been running it long after the companies themselves have gone under. Rackham Confrontation is a prime example. It's about to be re-released by a whole new company, but in the intervening 10 years or more since Rackham went under, Confrontation has still been massively played in various parts of Europe. Maybe not so much in the United States or the like, but the community make the game. And if it's going to survive, it needs to be something that people want to play. So hang on, release 4th edition when 4th edition is ready. And as to whether or not that's the right edition of the game, people will find that out whenever they come to the rules. And if they don't, they won't play it. And if it's something worth playing, they'll stick with it and hopefully the community will grow.
Guys, can I ask us a really simple question? What is the point of a new edition of a game?
From a company point of view, it's cash. It's a cash injection. That's why GW had a 4-year schedule. Every 4 years you would get a new edition to drive sales.
Isn't it 3 now? I think they do 40k every 3 years these days.
I don't pay any attention to them in case they get encouraged. I mean, I joked the other day that they're going like Windows. 10th edition is going to be, the last edition that you can own. And then from 40k 11th edition, you'll be paying a subscription where they'll just amend things as and when they can be arsed. But if you look at a lot of independent games companies, so the likes of Two Fat Lardies, they do a lot of historic games, or I have games from a whole host of small publishers. They tend not to do multiple editions because they don't have a miniature range to sell with it. They don't have a company that is standing on the back of it. They go, here are the rules, they work well. And the only time they would release a new edition is if, after years of playtest and feedback, there was something so intrinsically broken with the rules they put out that they needed to be amended. Otherwise, you don't see new versions of Panzer Grenadier and things like that because they stand on the rules. Blucher by Sam Mufasta has never done a huge amount of new editions of rules. The rules are all in and of themselves self-contained. But when you've got a company that also has a miniature range and multiple employees, a new edition is a chance to go, here's my game again, keep buying the game, get a cash injection. Off the back of that, new rules, you'll sell more models. So it's an interesting one.
Also, when you sell books, like army books and so on, it's kind of a way to invalidate the previous ones, potentially.
Yeah.
Right? Like, in software, usually when you increase the major version number is when you make incompatible changes to some elements, or you have massive feature changes or UI changes and so on. And so it's not just like a yearly edit, and you need a completely new book to make it a clean start somehow. So that could be also a way to see a new edition from a gamer's perspective, not just a business perspective. But otherwise, I agree with you. I think it's a good opportunity to push everyone to just rebuy the core book and potentially the starter and have a massive launch movement. I think also we are not the best audience and category for this because we are really assiduous players of Kings of War, and so we don't need a new edition to play it. But for a lot of people, they've played maybe some Kings of War and then they moved on to play whatever else for a while. And so if Mantic comes out with, hey, we're launching a big new edition, maybe some of those very casual players or people who don't play Kings of War regularly but have heard about it and played it a little bit or didn't really jump in, that is also maybe their cue to just jump in. And so I think it's kind of a milestone also for the game and for the community. But yeah, let's see exactly how Mantic approaches it, because I think they haven't really said much about exactly what they want to do with it or in what direction they want to take the game or anything. I think they've made it very clear they don't want to break anything.
To be honest, Clem, I'm not envious of them right now because I think so many people have got so many different expectations or demands on what the new edition is.
Contradictory demands, right? Yes.
And I think
absolutely.
I think actually I don't know why everyone's so excited about it because the game's in a great position as it is. I mean, why we're not desperately. It's not like War Machine where the players were saying this is broken, we need a new edition, and then they rush the new edition out because people are shouting at them, and then it doesn't quite work as they intended it to, and it makes the whole problem worse. We're not in a situation where we're desperate for change. The game is in a brilliant place right now. It's great, right?
Yeah.
So I don't know why people are so excited for a new edition.
I think it's. I'm excited in the sense like it's important to me because Kings of War is my main game, and so I'm curious to see what they will do with it because the chances that they completely mess it up are non-zero, right? And so I think that creates some passion around it. But I think you're right. Maybe it was a communication mistake to say, oh yeah, we're going to do a 4th edition next year or sometime soon. Maybe they've talked about it a bit too early on without more elements to it. And maybe that discussion could have started later, although obviously they would be thinking about these questions internally. Like it's the future of the business.
I mean, things like Gerry mentioned earlier, the command dice, that's a great example. I think to some extent they are kind of soft. They're trying these things out, right, to see how people respond to them. How does it work? And actually, I think the command dice thing is a total red herring because I think initially we had people saying, "Oh, this is so overpowered. This is going to," and then we had people complaining, "Well, actually, it doesn't really, it's not impactful enough." So, I think the command dice thing is
usually the same people making these comments. It's both too much and not enough, and I just don't want it. So
exactly. So it will be interesting. I mean, the conversation Gerry had, what Gerry was saying earlier about, well, do you know what? If I don't like 4th edition, I'm really happy with 3rd edition. I'll just keep playing that. That's something as I'm getting older, I'm increasingly on board with. I don't need permission from anyone to do stuff. I'm just going to do what makes me happy. So it'd be nice. I mean, we've built a really nice little community for Kings of War here, and obviously I want that to keep growing and carry on. And
that's maybe true, but then
maybe that becomes harder if we don't play the latest edition. I don't know.
That means you stop going to Clash of Kings after 25 then.
Yeah. Do
you see what I mean? So I agree with you. I mean, I love playing the old version of Necromunda. I really like Warmaster. Also has tons of issues, but I like very, very much this community-based maintenance of the rules. I think this also is one of the strengths of Kings of War with the rules committee, keeping things fresh. and keeping it, with a good connection to the community and what people actually want when they play the games. So I totally agree with you on if we hate 4th edition for whatever reason, no one will come to our houses and take our books away from us, and we can totally still play 3rd edition, right? So that's absolutely true. It's just, how can I say it? It's not an excuse or a justification for them screwing up 4th edition. Let's just say this. So yeah. Anyway.
And the other thing I'd say, Clem, is if 4th edition is screwed up, hey, what's good for Mantic is not necessarily what's good for our podcast. Imagine if it's a disaster, we're going to get some good content out of that situation. That dumpster fire is going to get us some good content.
It
right,
could
Gerry?
Also be that it's a disaster from our perspective, but from a business perspective, it does really well. And that's all of us hate it, but they touch a new audience or a big group of existing players actually love it, and we don't, and that's how it is.
Great
Sorry,
point,
I cut you off.
Great point. Gerry, anything to add, kind sir?
No, I think that pretty much covers the long and the short of it. We'll see what it has to bring in the future. I do think as long as they take their time, Mantic have built a reputation on solid rule sets, and I think trying to push it out early and half-assing it would be the worst thing they can do. So, we'll have faith in the team behind us and what the rules committee come up with, and hopefully it'll be a game that people do want to keep playing and doesn't just get dropped like a hot potato.
Yeah, really nice summary, buddy. Super. So let's move on to topic of the month. So this was licensing is our topic of the month. So this was brought about really by a couple of listener questions. So shall I read out the 2 listener questions to give it a bit of background, and then we'll go on from there, Gerry?
Sure thing.
You could, yeah.
So Tam, so he's saying Assassin's Creed board game would only work with height applied to the mechanics, in my opinion. I wonder how it would work. Gits, I should know what Gits is, but
Ghost in the Shell.
Oh, Ghost in the Shell, thank you. Could be a cool RPG, though. Co-op with enemies getting harder later on. It's a weird one because height, stealth, and combat are huge in the series. He's not wrong there. And Kodos says, I guess a lot of people are curious on how they managed to get the Assassin's Creed feeling into a board game, or what the game will be about. Halo Flashpoint, where the license dictate that it must cover the most recent available game. This could also be the case with Assassin's Creed, though I hope it's much more about the very first game. Yes, so Assassin's Creed has just had a very successful samurai game, and the internet's been blowing up because it's based around a black samurai, even though it's based on a true story. So, Gerry, I'm just going to hand over to you, buddy.
That's very decent of you. Right, there's a couple of things going on here, and I'd like to start off by throwing one of my colleagues from work under the bus. So Ben, he's been interested in Kings of War and Dead Zone and bits and pieces like that for a while. Never really played them. But he has often commented on the fact that Mantic's licenses, Mantic's IPs, seem to punch far above their weight, to the extent where Mantic's IPs are better than Mantic's actual own properties in both game design and in execution. So I don't think anybody's looked at anything for The Walking Dead or for Halo and went, oh, I'm not sure about those models. They look a bit off, they look a bit this, they look a bit that, which we often see with some of the Mantic releases. People get underwhelmed, to say the least, sometimes. So we have this aspect of licensing with Mantic where they seem to put more time and effort and quality control into their licenses, probably for the reason that they have to pass everything past a license holder, compared to their own stuff where when it's designed, it will go into the studio or Ronnie or whoever, and they'll go, yeah, that's fine, tear on with it. There's not the same level of focus on Mantic's own stuff as there is to the licensed bits and pieces. So I thought that would be the first one we'd start with discussing, if anybody has any comments about quality of licensing.
This is Max McDougall saying, so much universe, so little time.
It's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, the rules to Hellboy, Walking Dead are absolutely top-notch. In terms of model quality, I don't know if I'd say there's a difference, really. I'm not sure. I mean, for example, Hellboy models do exactly what they need to do. They look iconic. You know, they closely cover the art. I'd say the quality is kind of good board game pieces. I would say it's, you know, they're PVC, but they're decent quality. But yeah, I mean, definitely, I always really enjoy the Mantic license games. Clem, what do you think, buddy?
I think one element of this is whenever you work with a license, you benefit from all of the work that has been put into the license beforehand. And so when you do a board game that is Worms, the board game, well, all of the work around the design and the, you know, creating the universe and creating attachment from an audience into this product, that has been done for you before already. And so I guess what I'm trying to say here, maybe to some extent you instantly get pink tinted glasses when you look at a product like a licensed product, because you love the license already, so you already half sold into the product. And so I don't think the Halo models have to be outstanding compared to Dead Zone models to be more appealing to someone who likes the Halo universe. And so maybe if it's from a purely technical perspective, exactly the same quality of models, the rules are also pretty much exactly the same. But on one hand, you have a universe that people have zero connection to, and so you have to win them over by whatever mechanics, versus on the other hand, someone is already wanting to buy whatever you have to offer, and they will think later. Or what I'm saying is you would have to screw it up pretty badly for a good license to not sell, versus even if you have a very good game, very decent model range and so on, if you are not known by the general public, then it's a lot harder to make a sale, I guess.
Yeah, I see where you're coming from there. But I would say, and this is something I kind of agree with Ben on, insofar as the Walking Dead plastics, they were one piece or pre-built PVC, whatever way you want to put it. And at the same time, they were still releasing PVC models when The Walking Dead was launched for all of their own properties. And the quality between those was night and day, even insofar as if you look at things like League of Infamy. The League of Infamy board game plastics, when you compare those to The Walking Dead board game plastics, there's still levels of magnitudes of difference between those, especially when it comes to the rubbery nature of them, that where you just think, you've worked with somebody who've produced these models for you. Surely you can get them to do the same for your own IP, so that you don't end up with elves with spears that rub the back of their own neck because they're so bent, things like that. It just, in that regard, I go, yes, the design work is all done, and that's, they can do similar design work for their own IPs, but the execution of the models, you're just thinking, can you not just take that extra step with your own product? It seems madness. Because
you're not paying a license fee, right? You're not having to spend the extra money to secure the license, right?
Yes, so they could invest more. I think I agree with you on this, Gerry. I backed the League of Infamy. I think it was a Kickstarter, right? And I got the box, and I liked the pitch of it. The pitch of it sounded like an interesting game. And then I opened the box, and then I've never played it. And I want to say, though, they as in Mantic, I think I've shown that they are capable of doing better quality and take better care of this with Dungeon Saga Origins. For me, Dungeon Saga Origins, there's not much I would change to how they've done it in a way. Like the models are pretty good quality, all of the gaming components, so the cards, the tiles, the tokens, compared to Leagues of Infamy, for example, for me was a very, very clear step up. And I guess you're probably right, Gerry, that when there's a license holder and you bring them, pre-production prototypes, they just throw you back to work again on it if it's not up to par. But I don't think it's a capacity or ability question. It's maybe they don't have the size or the teams to structurally focus on this when it's their own games. Because I had the impression that they just throw a lot of stuff onto the wall to see what sticks. And I had the impression there's a lot of pressure to just move on to the next thing and maybe not take enough time to get it right.
I think what you just said, Clem, I suspect is true. I think there's pressure to bring in the next revenue stream or the next burst of money coming in the tills, or there has historically been. Do we think there's been a change at all? Since Mantic announced the board game division and they have some resources dedicated to board games, do we think perhaps that might have led to a little change?
Well, this is the other point I wanted to bring up, and it sort of comes in with the comment that was made by Kodos about how they plan on sort of managing the Assassin's Creed feeling for the board game. And also, I think somebody else questioned about the rumours of Ghost in the Shell getting a game, either an RPG or a board game, and how this was all going to tie in. Because this came out of the back of the talk of Kings of War 4th, and they were saying, well, they've got this, and this have all been rumoured or are due to come. Do they have the capacity to do this? And I think a lot of people have forgotten that Mantic set up the board game division as a separate thing. So the license is there for whatever it happens to be, but it's not taking away from the studio design team anymore at Mantic for Kings of War, Dead Zone, Warpath, whatever. Instead, there is the separate group that came with buying River Horse, so having Alessio Cavatore and the people under him on their board game side of things, they are now available to do these IPs and not have to worry about either diluting Mantic's work as a whole or having a subpar license where they're just trying to produce the next sort of moneymaker to tide them over for a while. I know it wasn't Chris Caesar, it was his brother, whose name escapes me, worked on Worms. So having a dedicated board game team to look at these IPs from a different standpoint is a really good way of doing things. Assassin's Creed will be interesting for a couple of reasons. One is the question about how to get the feeling of an Assassin's Creed game onto the board. This has already been done. Assassin's Creed has had a board game for about 6 years. I've got it sitting next door. It was published by a French-Canadian company called Triton Noir. So I don't know if they've lost the license and Mantic have picked it up. Currently it's still available on the Triton Noir website. Or if Mantic have licensed a very specific different part of the Assassin's Creed to work with. And somebody was asking about Halo Flashpoint dictates that the license has to cover the most available games, and it could be the case with Assassin's Creed. The thing with licensing is it can be as broad or as narrow as the licensee wants it to be. So they could literally hand Mantic the Assassin's Creed license. Go nuts, whatever you want to do from our catalogue, from the initial release through to Valhalla, through to the Japanese one that's just come out, whatever you want, you can do whatever. Or they could turn around and go, you can only do Valhalla, or you can only do certain parts of Valhalla. So if there was additional downloadable content afterwards, you can't touch that. You can only touch what was in the main game. because a licensee will want to get as much out of a license as they can, and if they can subdivide a license into smaller and smaller parts, then they will do that. So for Mantic to come in and go, they're going to do an Assassin's Creed license, it could be very broad indeed, or it could be very, very restrictive and very niche, and maybe that's what they want. I mean, with Umbrella Academy, they had a very focused board game that zoomed in on the concept of the Umbrella Academy without it going off more like Hellboy, where you have a lot of dungeon crawling aspects. They just went, no, it's a board, here's a deck of cards, there are miniatures, you don't need to use those. If you don't have them, it doesn't matter. And Assassin's Creed could be like that for them. They could do something all bells and all whistles with tons of figures. I know for my Assassin's Creed game, there's hundreds of figures in there, including things like gondolas and towers and haystacks to jump into and all sorts. But Mantic may just be looking at this as a point of view of a board game license that's going to be relatively self-contained, that they don't need to invest a ton of tooling into, and can instead have the board game team or the board game division stand on their own 2 feet and just do a board game for this particular aspect of Assassin's Creed.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing to consider. One thing I was thinking about also is I think one of the big interests in the licensing part is you could use the skills you already have. Or, like Alessio, when he was running River Horse on his own, you're kind of selling the expertise in all the connections in manufacturing and all of the experience in doing other games before. And so I think it's interesting to think about what is the relationship for the licensor or licensee, like the person holding the license, and then Mantic doing the game. And I think, it's an interesting question for Mantic to think about what they know best and where could they bring in the most value. And in that line of thinking, I was very interested when I saw that Archon Studio is doing their own license game with the Starcraft that we mentioned already, because Archon Studio is the manufacturing partner for Mantic, not for their licensed stuff, I guess. Like, I don't think Archon Studio is manufacturing the Halo stuff, for example.
But they're doing hard plastics.
Yeah, they're doing the hard plastics.
The hip stuff,
not,
yeah.
Yes, but still, it's an interesting thing to see, that they can work on different things with different people and then compete in a way. Because I guess the people who were doing the Starcraft, like the Starcraft license holders, they had to make a decision on who do they talk to for, bringing it to tabletop. So that's an interesting question.
I mean, Archon are a prime example in that they've done several IPs of their own, including a He-Man IP. Now, when they got that, they had the license to make a He-Man miniatures tabletop game for Europe. At the same time, whoever owns Masters of the Universe, Netflix or whoever it is these days, they also licensed, I think, Cool Mini or Not, the website for rating people's paint jobs, to do a He-Man tabletop miniatures game for the US market. So there are 2 Masters of the Universe He-Man games in 28mm on the market. You cannot buy the European one in America. You cannot buy the American one in Europe unless you get somebody to buy it locally and then ship it for you. And it shows just how marginalized and sectioned IPs can be.
As a gamer, that's super annoying. And Archon, is it Archon Studios? Am I getting that right?
I've no idea.
Archon?
I've always called them Archon, but
Archon,
who knows?
Yeah. And am I right, Gerry? Am I right in thinking they came from Prodos Games? Is that right?
Yes.
So Prodos Games imploded, and then the Archon Games was founded. Because that's an interesting example. Because Prodos all they had was 2 licenses. They had the AVP tabletop game, and then at the time they had the Warzone license.
Warzone, which we've already mentioned, Warzone Resurrection has just been released as a reinvention of it. But for a while, Prodos did do Warzone as well.
And I remember you did that for On the Tabletop, or at least one of your colleagues did, I think. And actually, I've got a box full of their stuff that I haven't built yet, sitting for...
I know a gentleman in Texas who would buy that off you. He will kill anyone you choose to name for any of the Protoss era Warzone stuff. He cannot have enough of it. I'm just throwing that out there.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, the game actually looks pretty good. I mean, I was kind of thinking the... like the bunker, the trenches thing I'm 3D printing, that would fit perfectly with Warzone. So, no, it's going to be at some point I'll get around to it. It's going to be a hobby project. But yeah, that's a shame because I thought that game actually looked pretty cool. And the Protoss made nice minis too. I think it's mostly resin, but it's really cool stuff.
Yeah, they had, it was a weird injection molded resin. So not dissimilar to Finecast. There's some other board games have used something similar, like Lazy Squire Games, Wild Descent uses something like that. Archon have moved away from it. I know for a while a lot of people were very dismissive of Archon because of the problems Protoss had, where people didn't get the stuff they'd bought and all the rest because the license was with Protoss, and when it went under they couldn't get pieces. So there's an awful lot of ill will towards the new company, but they seem to have got past that now. I've not seen them do anything or say they're doing anything that has fallen on its arse. And subsequently, the Wolfenstein board game that they have the IP for, it's absolutely superb. The plastics for that are great, and it has that Wolfenstein dungeon crawl feel, and it's absolutely brutal. So I think IPs can be a boon to a company, both for, as Clem was saying, a ready source of already developed genres, miniatures, whatever it happens to be. All of the legwork has gone into building up the IP and people's recognition of it. So you can just go in and go, we just need to manufacture miniatures for it in a game that works. And it can bring new people on board with the company because they may not recognize Kings of War or Dead Zone or Warpath, but they'll recognize Halo. They'll recognize Ghost in the Shell, whatever it happens to be in that regard. So IPs they can be a tricky line to walk. In some cases, I know at one point, GW's Lord of the Rings license, there was talk that it more or less saved the company because it blew up in such a monumental way that people didn't expect. And at the time they got that license, just prior to the Lord of the Rings sort of game coming out, movies even coming out, they weren't in a great place financially through a lot of ill-conceived expansion and money being wasted here, there, and everywhere. So IPs for companies can be absolutely superb, but at the same time, there are companies out there like Spartan Games. Spartan, wasn't it? Did Firestorm Armada and the like, and they got the
it was Spartan, and they had the Halo license.
They got the Halo license, and they got the Halo license at entirely the wrong time when nobody was talking about or playing Halo, and it was a massive 6 or 10 mil game, so it was a huge, epic style game that nobody who played Halo had any interest in doing, and then that company fell over. So you don't want to be overpaying for a license that is just going to be the death knell of the company. And I think so far Mantic have more or less ridden that line perfectly. The only time they've run into any problems at all was with the RPGs that they sub-licensed out to another company, and then that went horribly wrong.
The only thing I'd say, Gerry, is that I think Mantic were hoping that the Hellboy movie, there was kind of a reimagining of the Hellboy movie a few years ago. I think they probably would have liked to be that to be a lot more successful. I actually quite enjoyed that movie, but it's not the greatest. But
it's a bit closer to the actual comics as well, which would have been good for Mantic because it actually had things that had appeared, like the Wild Hunt and the like, that you would see in the comics, and therefore because they had the license for the comics but not the films.
Yeah, good point.
They could have sat alongside that much happier. Yeah.
But I was a backer of the RPG, and that was just a total disaster. I think the chap writing it, say Red Scar, they had a really good. They were an established RPG writer with a good reputation. I think they'd done, let's say, for example, Infinity, but they'd done, some really good properties previously. They'd done licenses with no issues. And I think the chap behind it, because I think it was a one-man band, I think he just ran into personal issues. And I think whenever Mantic asked for an update, he was kind of managing to scrape together some stuff to show, to pretend he was making progress, but ultimately he wasn't, and I think he was kind of imploding. So I'll be honest, I don't know what happened behind the scenes, but I do have a certain amount of, I lost money, I do have a certain amount of sympathy for the person, because, I think there's absolutely no suggestion this was a scam or anything like that. I think his personal life imploded and he didn't manage, and, but for the grace of God, go I, and all that. So, yeah.
And it's one of those, because Hellboy was a license that Mantic had acquired, they ended up sending what had been done to some of the Caesars, to Chris and his brother, whose name I really should know, and he's going to hate me, Jack Caesar. So Chris and Jack and a few others who work independently of River Horse as well. As well as I think they were part of River Horse, which may be how they got that. But they ended up having to write or reconstruct what had been done for Hellboy to make it actually salvageable and publishable as an RPG. But at the same time, Red Scar was also working on a Kings of War RPG, and that Mantic just had to go, we've paid once to have this RPG made, and then we've had to pay to have the RPG redone by somebody else to get Hellboy out, so we didn't suffer on their license. They couldn't afford to pay the money twice to have Kings of War done, which again shows just how, when it's in-house, an IP can be great. When you're bringing in an external operator to do whatever it happens to be, miniature design, board game design, RPG design, then you are obviously still beholden to the license that you've signed up to in the contract you've done, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see where they go with the IPs that they're talking about and how they pan out. Like I say, I think a lot of them will often sort of drop to the board game division, because they'll be more appropriate as a board game rather than as a full-fledged miniatures game or that sort of thing. I don't think we'll see a huge overlap in some of the upcoming IPs. So we won't be looking at a Ghost in the Shell miniatures game or a miniature-heavy Assassin's Creed game. They make much more sense from a board game point of view to keep them self-contained and bespoke, and then they can just focus in on making a piece of content, a game, RPG, whatever it happens to be, that actually reflects what the property's supposed to be, without having to worry about, can somebody make a gang of this? Can I get a war game on the tabletop for Ghost in the Shell? Probably not. So don't try and do it.
Yeah, and one thing you kind of touched on earlier, Gerry, is, if we think of a massive property like Halo, you just assume that will be a smashing success. But actually, the popularity of these things ebbs and flows to varying degrees. I mean, Star Wars is always Star Wars, right? No matter how crappy some of the films are, people always buy Star Wars stuff. But something like Halo, you're right, as you said, I mean, Spartan Games had the license, put out probably as I understand it, the games were very good, because they had a fleet battles game and a ground battles game. But it wasn't, it was probably at the wrong time, and it wasn't the game Halo players wanted. And so, maybe you pay an awful lot for these licenses, but then you're putting a noose around your neck because you need this to be incredibly successful. And if it's just moderately successful, you're in a big hole. So, a lot of this is going to be luck. And I think actually, I guess Mantic have been pretty lucky with their timing of the Halo game. I think, yes, they've given customers what they wanted and fans what they wanted. And I think the offering was absolutely fantastic in terms of new people who are maybe board gamers. You don't have to be a tabletop person to enjoy this product. You can be just a board gamer. And that's fantastic. But I think Mantic were lucky as well, in as much as it seems like Halo seems pretty popular at the moment. But having said that, I know the TV the TV series
Netflix
was recently
TV show.
cancelled.
Yeah.
After being very poorly received. So I think there's a huge slice of luck in all this stuff.
Yeah, I think there's also something else to this in the sense that for me, the whole Halo experience is also Mantic cashing on their very good game Dead Zone. And so, yes, the license is sort of popular at the moment, so it's a good context for them. But then I think anyone who likes Halo and actually tries the game is just sold. And so I think that's another critical part of it. Like, to do well with the license, you need to know what you're doing and also good underlying products. Because the license on its own gives you the first step, but then the next steps come from, did you make a good product? And not just a good product, but a product that the people who like the license actually want to buy. And so I think for Halo, this really is this combination of Dead Zone is an excellent game, and therefore Halo is an excellent game. And then the people like the license, and then the combination of the two is explosive in a good way.
Yeah, so it's a little bit like Clem. I think there was an athlete or something, and the quote was, and I can't remember who it was, dear listener, but the quote was, "The more I practice, the luckier I get." And maybe, if you have a great license, great product, you're far more likely to be successful than if you just, take a poor game, slap a Halo sticker on it, make some, put some cheap minis in there, and chuck it out the door, see how it goes.
Yeah, more sweat on the training field, less blood on the battlefield, I think is.
There we go. Cool. Gerry, did we sort of was that the conversation around licensing you would hope to have?
Yeah, I think so. I'd be keen to find out what people think about licensing, because sometimes people look at it and go, why are Mantic not doing more? Why are we not seeing more Dead Zone? Why have we not got new Firefight? Oh, they've only released one plastic for Kings of War this year, but they're doing dump IPs. And I think I'd be curious to see how people view the IP thing, because the revenue it brings in allows Mantic then to devote themselves to their own properties in the long run. So yeah, we'll see how things go and what people think about the IP question as well.
Yeah,
how good,
very
bad, or
much
different
so.
it is.
And if we're honest, guys, I mean, do any of us think that Dead Zone or Firefight have been massive money makers for Mantic?
I don't think so, no.
No. And they've been very successful, very well regarded, and, Firefight's won an award. But in terms of bringing in the money, they probably haven't done a great deal. As Gerry says, I think they need a cash cow, and then they can put a bit of that money back into their own IPs. But yeah, and it's interesting stuff, buddy. Yeah, I'm definitely going to keep an eye on this, and also I'm just going to keep a mental note every time I see a Mantic newsletter. How many of these things are Mantic IPs, and how many of them are licenses? Be interesting. And Gerry, should I be looking forward to playing that version of Warzone? By the way, the Prodos one, because it looks cool.
I've not played it in a long time. It wasn't bad. They obviously wanted to push more miniatures on the table. It was like the second edition 40k going to third. You went from having 20 to 30 men and maybe one vehicle or a small unit of lancers or bikes or whatever it happened to be, to wanting to play out sort of a 50, 60, 70 men, a
Right.
tank platoon, that sort of thing. So it was different, certainly. I'm still very old school, so I quite like the original.
Interesting. Well, I mean, I can use the models for the original anyway, can't I, right?
Yeah,
Why
like
not?
I say, or Crispin will have your arm off at the shoulder like a Basilean cutting out an ingrown fingernail.
Fantastic. Guys, anything to touch on before we finish up the show?
I don't think so. I will be at Salute. I believe Ronnie will probably be at Salute. I got my first game of Halo there last year, so I'm keen to see what else they bring this year. Possibly steal his hat. And if anybody's any questions for Ronnie, throw them down below and I'll try and ask him when I'm round there. Who knows? I may even have a cameraman with me.
Nice.
Amazing, Gerry. Brilliant. That's exciting. Have a brilliant time anyway. It sounds absolutely amazing. And I'll have a great time in Dublin, I'm certain of it, or in Ireland. Fantastic. Gerry, do you want to take us out, buddy?
Well, folks, that's us for another month. We'll look forward to seeing what you come up with in the comments. Thank you for listening. And remember, so much universe, so little time.